Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Daniele De Santis and Eleonora Manta. In 2020, Daniele De Santis turned 33 years old. He was born in Lecce, Italy, and lived in a nice apartment in an affluent part of the city. Throughout his career in sports, he became a well-known referee for football matches. By 2019, Daniele had officiated over 130 matches during the spring season, demonstrating his success in the profession. Daniele was getting ready to officiate during the 2020-2021 season, but unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. At this time, his girlfriend, Eleonora Manta, was pursuing her own dream of higher education in law. Recently, she had won a competition that allowed her to enroll in the law faculty at the university, marking a significant milestone in her life. With this dream starting to come true, she decided to focus on her desire to start a family as well. Fortunately, everything was going well, as she and Daniele had been in a relationship for several years and were preparing to get married. They had much in common, sharing hobbies and reflecting each other's personalities. According to their family and friends, they rarely argued, were often seen as a joyful, energetic pair. It seemed that a bright future awaited this lovely couple. Daniele grew up in a loving family with both parents and two sisters. In contrast, Eleonora was raised by her mother, who had to care for her children alone after separating from an abusive husband who struggled with alcoholism. Eleonora's mother had a daughter and two sons from that difficult relationship. Eleonora lived with her family until early 2020 and was preparing to move out to live with Daniele. There was one complication: Daniele had previously rented out a room in his apartment to students from the local university. He needed to evict the tenant before Eleonora could move in. She initially planned to move in during the summer of 2020, but various organizational challenges arose. As a result, they set the official start date for their cohabitation as September. The evening of this incident would turn into a horrifying chapter for Daniele and Eleonora. It all started on September 21, 2020. Neighbors heard distressing screams from a woman. At 8:54 p.m., a local boy walking his dog noticed a strange man running out of an apartment on Via Montello. The boy caught sight of the man's cold, emotionless eyes and froze in fear during his brief gaze. The man fled the scene, and the boy hurried home to report the incident to the police. When officers arrived, they found anxious neighbors who reported seeing a hooded man escaping from a nearby apartment. In the stairwell, they discovered Daniele lying on his back in a pool of blood. He had died from multiple stab wounds. The door to his apartment was wide open, and inside, Eleonora lay injured in the hallway. She had also succumbed to her wounds, having suffered numerous stab wounds. Initially, the police considered that the attacker might have targeted them for robbery, as Daniele was well known and wealthy, making him a tempting target. However, as investigations progressed, this theory began to lose credibility. Several important pieces of evidence were collected at the crime scene, including cable ties, 2 bottles of bleach, a black surgical mask, and women's flesh-colored tights. That tight had a drawn, sad face on them, were stained with blood. A handprint found on the tights likely belonged to the attacker during the struggle. It was challenging to identify the assailant who attacked Daniele and Eleonora, but it was clear from the start that the attack was particularly brutal. The evidence suggested that it was not a robbery but a planned act. Detectives used witness accounts to create a sketch of the attacker. Thanks to a torn mask, several people saw him, allowing them to provide a detailed description of the knife-wielding criminal. Some residents glimpsed him through their peepholes. One woman saw him brandishing a knife while partially opening her door. Additionally, the boy walking his dog remembered the attacker well. He described him as a young man of average height wearing a hoodie and carrying a dark blue backpack. This boy also noted the direction in which the attacker fled, helping investigators begin their pursuit of the assailant. The killer hurriedly wanted to escape before the authorities arrived. Likely, this allowed the boy to survive the encounter. The victims' bodies were quickly taken for autopsy and forensic examinations. At this time, their families decided on burying them in separate locations. Daniele was honored in a farewell service at the Lecce Cathedral early on the morning of September 26, while Eleonora was laid to rest in her hometown, just a few kilometers from where the tragic events occurred. Eleonora's mother chose to dress her daughter in a wedding gown that she had intended to give her when Eleonora moved in with her boyfriend, as they planned to marry once she settled into her new home. Meanwhile, investigators worked diligently on the evidence and searched for the attacker, using the findings from the forensic examination. It was revealed that Daniele had suffered 38 stab wounds, while Eleonora had 37. This level of violence was clearly excessive for a robbery gone wrong, as robbers typically use 1 or 2 shots and do not spend time inflicting multiple stab wounds. The nature of the attack indicated that the perpetrator had specifically targeted his victims, suggesting it was an act of revenge or a crime driven by passion. The investigation into the murder focuses on Daniele and Eleonora's acquaintances, as there are suspicions of a love triangle involving them. However, it is difficult to believe that either Daniele or Eleonora had extramarital affairs. They were considered the perfect couple, deeply in love and planning to marry soon, making any theories of infidelity unlikely. Their upcoming move together was intended to lay the groundwork for starting a family, which contradicts the notion of a love triangle. Witnesses reported hearing Eleonora's anguished cries, during which she mentioned the name Andrea or something similar. This led investigators to search for men with that name, prioritizing those closest to Daniele and Eleonora. The next suspect was the deceased's best friend. When investigators checked Danielle's mobile phone records, they found that he had contacted his friend at 7:30 p.m. However, this friend had a solid alibi that was easily verified, so he was removed from suspicion. While looking into, the police identified a 37-year-old acquaintance of the couple, who quickly became the main suspect. He also had a strong alibi supported by multiple witnesses and video footage proving he was not at the crime scene during the attack. He also removed from suspicion. The police examined the entire list of names, but none of the men named Andrea appeared to be connected to the crime. The investigation reached a standstill, but this did not last long. The verification process took considerable time, but it was eventually revealed that the confusion arose from a mistake. The name was actually different. By this point, several days had passed since the murders. The Carabinieri were unsure who had attacked Daniele and Eleonora or why. They faced mounting pressure from the worried public. The precinct was inundated with calls demanding the capture of the criminal and the streets made safe. This panic led to numerous false reports about potential suspects that needed to be investigated. The investigation faced delays due to new information. The police discovered a student who had previously rented a room from Daniele before Eleonora moved in. This student was named Antonio DeMarco, not Andrea. The investigators decided to look into Antonio anyway. There was limited information available about him, but what they found was concerning. A witness at the police station, who knew Antonio personally, recognized him from a composite sketch shown on television. The man became another important witness and revealed that Antonio was studying nursing at the university. Unfortunately, at that time, Antonio was not living on campus, and the investigators could not reach him since no one knew his whereabouts. A significant breakthrough occurred during a second examination of the crime scene. Forensic experts found a handwritten note that had been overlooked during the initial visit to Daniele and Eleonora's apartment. This note, along with masks, bleach, and ties, outlined the steps the attacker planned to take against victims. The first step involved returning home, where a change of clothes had been prepared, along with the ties meant to restrain the victims. The note detailed plans to destroy evidence, included an alibi claiming the attacker would be at home during the incident. In reality, the attacker intended to go to the victim's house, having mapped out several routes to avoid surveillance cameras during the short time needed to reach them. The criminal had a mask and a balaclava made from tights to hide his identity. While he planned to attack Daniele and Eleonora, he did not specify his motive. After the attack, he intended to return home quickly to dispose of the bloody clothes, use bleach, and meticulously eliminate any evidence of the crime. The most comprehensive part of the note focused on avoiding police detection and leaving no trace. It included instructions for covering his fingerprints. He planned to handle other items only after ensuring he would not leave any evidence on them. The attacker allocated around 15 minutes to this cleanup process and set aside half an hour to completely erase any traces of the crime. The police discovered a list that helped them connect the last suspect to the double murder. Their next step was to locate Antonio and collect his materials for comparison. However, his whereabouts were still unknown. Detectives started to track the killer's movements after the crime by analyzing surveillance footage and gathering witness statements to reconstruct his route. Nonetheless, he was able to traverse part of his route without being seen. Detectives tracked down the murderer to a street just a few blocks from Danielle's home, where they discovered that Antonio DeMarco was living with several other students. The police located Antonio. They began monitoring him to collect his DNA, fingerprints, and ideally, handwriting samples for comparison with the note and evidence from the crime scene. He led a seemingly normal life, appearing unaffected by the incident, and mostly spent his time alone. He often visited various shops around the city, including a comic book store near his apartment. At the comic book store, Antonio paid in cash, which could have left his fingerprints. The money was confiscated and sent for analysis. Additionally, investigators obtained handwriting samples from Antonio by examining his university assignments. The analysis revealed that his handwriting matched the note found at the crime scene. With this evidence, the case against him strengthened, indicating his involvement in the double murder. At 21:40 on September 28, 2020, Antonio DeMarco was arrested. In the parking lot, he encountered two carabinieri approached him, prepared to draw their weapons. Instead of resisting, Antonio smirked at one of the officers and asked how long they had been following him, feeling a sense of relief at being caught. By this point, detectives were certain that Antonio was the murderer. They had no doubts about his guilt, but the motive for the crime remained unclear. At just 21 years old, Antonio was an outstanding student who had always presented himself well during his internship at the medical center. His classmates and colleagues would never have guessed he was capable of committing a double murder. The police were astonished to discover how effectively he had concealed his true nature. Antonio's mother was the first to discuss her son's issues. She explained that he had spent countless hours drawing since early childhood, often creating unsettling images. He was easily distracted from this activity and could sometimes panic if interrupted. His psychiatrist confirmed that he exhibited other troubling behaviors. As Antonio grew older, he changed his social circle. While studying, he chose to live with Daniele, who offered him a room at a good price. It was conveniently located near the university and close to the hospital where Antonio was interning. To Daniele, Antonio seemed like a respectful young man, and there were no red flags. For several months, their arrangement worked well. Antonio consistently paid his rent and was no trouble at all. When Daniele informed Antonio that he would need to move out to make room for Eleonora, Antonio handled it calmly. He mentioned that he planned to find an apartment closer to the hospital. Although he did not show any outward signs of distress, the news was a difficult surprise for him. He agreed to move out and returned the apartment key to Daniele on the agreed date. What Daniele was unaware of was that Antonio had made several copies of the key and held a deep resentment towards him. After his arrest, Antonio DeMarco quickly admitted to his crime. He revealed that he had intended to murder Daniele from the moment he moved in with Daniele. However, Eleonora's unexpected arrival disrupted his plans, forcing him to abandon his original idea of carrying out the attack. He had initially intended to strike while Daniele was asleep. Antonio stated that Daniele had never mistreated him, but he felt a growing dissatisfaction during his time in Daniele's apartment. He believed he harbored a lot of anger towards Daniele, which eventually led to an explosive outburst. This anger may have been intensified by jealousy over the couple's relationship. Throughout conversations with detectives, they observed that Antonio showed no remorse. He described the brutal double murder as if it were a normal, obvious act. Antonio claimed he arrived at Daniele's apartment that evening at 8:43 p.m. He first walked by the windows to listen and check if there were more than 2 people inside. If there were, he would have left, as he felt unprepared to confront a larger group. After confirming it was manageable, he used his key to enter through the bathroom while Daniele and Eleonora was having dinner in the kitchen. As soon as he entered, Daniele stood up to confront him. Antonio was wearing a mask made from women's pantyhose with a sad smiley face drawn on it. Antonio later admitted he planned to use this disguise for future crimes. Despite having a punctured lung, Daniele fought back fiercely. During the struggle, Daniele managed to tear off the mask, make Antonio fled without it, so witnesses were later able to identify him. Eleonora screamed and attempted to assist Daniele by trying to push Antonio away from him. In the process, she sustained serious injuries. Once Daniele was dealt with, Antonio turned his aggression toward her in the hallway, delivering multiple stabs. Antonio intended to leave a chilling message on the wall using red paint, representing the victim's blood, but chose not to do so. After committing the crime, he rushed into the street and accidentally bumped into a boy walking his dog before running home. Before entering the apartment he shared with other students, Antonio disposed of his bloody clothes and changed into a pre-prepared outfit from his backpack. In the weeks that followed, despite seeming calm, Antonio struggled with guilt and attempted to confess before being caught. One night, he wrote an email to his mother confessing to the double murder but ultimately decided not to send it. The police later discovered this unsent email on his laptop, but it held little significance as it wasn't seen as a formal admission of guilt. Interestingly, the email had 2 potential recipients, his mother and a doctor at a psychiatric hospital where he had been evaluated. Known for his mental instability and aggressive tendencies, but no one could have imagined the extent of his crimes. A notebook was found where he regularly documented his discontent with the world. He had very few friends and struggled to fit into society, leading him to seek the company of escort service in an attempt to escape his pain, but it proved ineffective. He longed to meet a normal girl and establish a relationship, but this desire turned into an obsession filled with disappointment. During his periods of distress, he became acutely aware of the relationships that others, including acquaintances and strangers, had. When he discovered that Daniele was in a relationship, Antonio experienced another emotional crisis and decided to channel his anguish into violence. In his diary, Antonio began crafting a gruesome script for an attack, complete with detailed accounts of torture and suffering. He portraying himself as a serial killer who inflicted pain on random people purely out of desire. Antonio explained that he started writing to express his suffering on paper instead of letting it affect his real life. On February 17, 2021, a request was made for a psychiatric evaluation. Antonio DeMarco underwent several assessments, and doctors concluded that he was sane. They diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder and other issues, but confirmed that he was fully aware of his actions during the attack. Consequently, Antonio was considered sane and fit to participate in the trial. Despite this, his lawyers continued to argue for his insanity and requested further evaluations, but these requests were denied. The prosecution presented compelling evidence of premeditation and careful planning, including statements made by the defendant himself. The judge even expressed his belief that if Antonio had not been apprehended, he likely would have become a serial killer, bringing violence to the streets. This viewpoint was supported by two psychiatrists who assessed his mental state before the trial. Forensic tests on items found at the crime scene, such as a mask, tights, and a knife, matched the defendant's DNA. Additionally, an investigation of Antonio's computer and phone revealed photographs of Daniele and Eleonora, suggesting that he had been planning the crime well in advance. Before going home, he messaged friends to inform them that they would never see him again, implying he anticipated being caught and imprisoned. On June 7, 2022, Antonio was convicted of double murder and received a life sentence. In November 2022, he received an additional 4-month sentence for possessing explicit photos of children on his computer. His defense team was unhappy with the verdict and pursued an appeal, which was granted on December 2022, resulting in a new trial. The defense argued that Antonio was insane and did not understand his actions during the murders. The prosecution's main goal was to prevent a potential serial killer from being released and to oppose any reduction of the sentence. In the end, the life sentence was reaffirmed. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jody Herring. In the small town of Berlin, Vermont, there lived a young woman named Jody Herring. Born in 1975, she came from a large family. In her early years, Jody was known to be a happy child, close to her father, and naturally bright and energetic. However, as she grew older, Jody faced several tragic incidents. The first and most traumatic occurred when she was about 5 years old. Her father was found dead on the lawn of their family home. It was believed he ended his life, as a weapon with his fingerprints was found near his hand. Jody was home at the time, and her father's death came as a shock to her. She gradually became deeply saddened by the loss, but she and her family were convinced that her father had not intended to harm himself. Shortly before his death, Jody's father revealed that he always kept a weapon nearby, even hiding a weapon under his pillow at night. This weapon was found at the scene of his death, and witnesses reported that it was placed in his hand. Ultimately, it was concluded that he ended his life. Following this tragedy, Jody began experiencing frequent seizures, but her family did not seek help from a psychiatrist. The family's neglect towards Jody was evident in many ways, affecting her emotions and behavior as she grew up. Family members and others observed her sitting for hours, staring blankly into space, seemingly unaware of her surroundings. One aunt described Jody as being completely detached from the world, while another noted that Jody always had a lifeless expression during her youth. Jody faced abuse from her mother and some relatives. The neglect escalated to the point where, at just 11 years old, Jody and her 14-year-old brother were kicked out of their home by their mother. After that, Jody often slept in the backseat of a car, and during particularly difficult times, she stayed with her grandparents. As a result, Jody grew up in a troubling and challenging environment. At 17, she was abused, which led to her first pregnancy and the birth of her child. A few years later, she had 2 more children out of wedlock. As she entered adulthood, Jody faced uncertainty and distress. Her daily life revolved around drinking and using banned substances, and her mental health continued to decline without proper care. Despite being a mother of 3, Jody was homeless. She did not have stable housing and often moved in with relatives to avoid living on the streets. Jody had multiple encounters with law enforcement and was known to the authorities for various offenses. Her legal troubles began in November 1998. when, at 23 years old, she was arrested for driving under the influence. This incident resulted in several months in jail. In June 2001, Jodi faced charges of selling counterfeit goods, and just 5 months later, she was convicted again of drunk driving. In May 2003, Jodi was charged and convicted for possessing a banned substance. By November 2015, it became evident that she had repeatedly broken the terms of her probation. Concerned about her lifestyle, social services began to investigate how her children were being cared for. Unfortunately for Jodi, but possibly better for her children, the Department of Children and Family Affairs took them away one by one. Ultimately, only one child remained in Jodi's custody, while her other children were placed with foster parents. Jodi tried her best to keep her youngest child close. However, when she and her youngest daughter became homeless, the school principal discovered this. He offered to help them, but during their conversations, he realized that Jodi was very inconsistent in her reasoning, and her actions lacked logic. It was unclear whether this was due to her frequent use of banned substances or a decline in her mental health. Despite the offer of assistance, Jodi firmly rejected help from the school. This made people who genuinely wanted to help her feel that she had no desire to change her bad habits for the sake of her youngest child. Therefore, the school principal decided that Jodi was unable to care for her youngest daughter in her current mental state, prompting a call to the Department of Family and Children's Affairs once again. At this point, Jodi was feeling increasingly anxious and fearful about the possibility of losing her last child. Sadly, her addiction overshadowed her anxiety. Even though she was homeless, Jodi continued to drink and use banned substances, which further worsened her mental health. Her apathy and refusal to change eventually led to her youngest daughter being taken away for the child's safety. When Jodi discovered that the school principal had reported her to the Department of Family and Children's Affairs, she became extremely angry. Witnesses said that Jodi lost control and was unable to think clearly. She expressed a desire to harm everyone involved in taking her children. She was consumed by her anger and sought revenge, blaming those around her. She showed her partner, Henry Premont, a handwritten list of people she wanted to kill, starting with her 2 cousins, Rhonda and Regina. It was clear that Jodi was having dangerous thoughts. She attempted to buy a weapon twice but was denied both times after background checks. In May 2015, Jodi's emotional and mental state began to deteriorate when she called Rhonda and Regina and threatened them. They found the call very disturbing, so they called emergency services to check on Jodi. When the ambulance arrived, they found Jodi lying on her bed in a semi-conscious state, surrounded by empty pill bottles and photos of her children, indicating a possible attempt to end her life. Following this incident, Jodi was mandated to undergo mental health treatment at a nearby facility for 90 days. This treatment was intended to help Jodi recover and get the support she needed. However, Jodi was disruptive and did not want to continue treatment. Instead, she asked to be released. Consequently, just a month later, she was released, despite the doctor's recommendation to continue. The doctor had highlighted her instability, but his advice was not binding, and the facility decided to let her go. Unfortunately, she returned to her old environment, making the decision of the medical facility a mistake for which they had to suffer the consequences. On August 7, 2015, in the small town of Berlin, Vermont, Tiffany, Rhonda's daughter and Jodi's niece, was preparing to visit a friend. Before leaving, she stopped to listen to a message on the answering machine. In the message, she heard Jodi's angry voice, warning that Rhonda and Regina should stop calling the department, or she would kill them. Tiffany wasn't worried because such outbursts were typical of Jodi's behavior, so she ignored the message and continued to meet her friend. Just 2 hours later, Jodi's brother Dwayne received 2 voice messages from her. He was busy and couldn't answer the phone in time, but in the messages, Jodi urged him to contact her immediately. saying he might regret not contacting her sooner. Jody leaves her temporary home and goes to the place she hates the most, the Department of Children and Families. When she arrived, she turned off the car and sat inside, seemingly waiting for something. Passers-by saw her screaming in the car, but it appeared she was only talking to herself. Despite her distress, no one stopped to check on her. They were all too busy with their own lives. It was unclear why Jody was outside the Department of Children and Family Affairs. Perhaps she was waiting for someone, but her children were in the care of others and could not be there. Shortly after 5 p.m., a woman named Lara Sobel emerged from the building. Lara, 48 years old, is a social worker with the Vermont Department of Children and Families. She was recognized for her intelligence. She attended the University of Vermont, earning a bachelor's degree in political science in 1989, followed by a master's degree in social work. Since 2002, she had dedicated herself to the Department of Children and Family Affairs, where she found her passion for helping those in need. At the beginning of her career, Lara met Timothy Farini. They fell in love, moved in together, and had 2 beautiful daughters, Julia and Ilona. Lara had a kind heart and was committed to supporting families who were less fortunate than her own. Lara was assigned to handle Jody's case, a decision made without any specific reasoning. This assignment could have easily gone to another available social worker. However, Jody perceived the situation differently. She blamed Lara for her daughter's removal, which is why she was waiting in the parking lot. On August 7, 2015, Lara finished her work as usual. After a long and tiring day, she felt relieved to leave and spend time with her family. As Lara exited the building, Jody stepped out of her car. Before closing the door, Jody retrieved a large object from inside. It was a weapon. Jody approached Lara, and she didn't have time to escape. Jody suddenly raised the weapon and attacked Lara in the face. After Lara collapsed, Jody attacked her again at close range, killing her instantly. Jody began jumping around the parking lot, brandishing the weapon and shouting that they deserved it for taking her 9-year-old daughter away. It was evident that Jody was aware of her actions. After she placed the weapon on the sidewalk, 2 bystanders quickly knocked her to the ground. Jody did not struggle. Instead, she calmly waited for the police to arrive. She had accomplished her goal, and nothing else mattered to her. When the police showed up, they noticed that Jody appeared calm and even laughed. As an officer helped her up, he spotted a red stain on her boot and asked her about it. Jody smirked, brushed it off with her boot, and described it as a trifling matter. In reality, it was Lara's blood. Jody was promptly taken into custody. Following her arrest, a more tragic story began to emerge. On the morning of Jody's arrest, her niece Tiffany, unaware of the situation, decided to visit her mother Rhonda, Aunt Regina, and grandmother Julianne Falzerano. Tiffany hadn't heard from them in almost a day, which was unusual since they typically called daily. By 8 a.m., Tiffany was driving to their house on Airport Road in Berlin. When she and her friend arrived, they noticed the front door was wide open. As they entered, Tiffany was met with a horrifying sight. She found her mother and grandmother lying on the floor, both dead. They had been attacked in the head. Tiffany hurried upstairs, anxious to find Regina alive, but sadly, her aunt had also been killed. It appeared that Regina had fought back before she died, and the police were called. After a thorough investigation, detectives discovered that the bullets came from the weapon that Jody had used. Devastated and searching for answers, Tiffany could only think of one person who could have harmed her family, Jody Herring. As a result, the charges against Jody changed from 1 murder to multiple counts of murder, leaving the community in shock. The trial received significant media attention, particularly concerning Jody's mental health. Psychiatrists conducted a comprehensive evaluation and diagnosed her with severe anxiety disorder. This condition likely contributed to her inability to trust others and her repeated refusal of available help. Nevertheless, this mental health issue did not exempt her from facing legal consequences. Jodi was declared sane and competent to stand trial. During the trial, Jodi appeared emotionally detached, often staring blankly. However, she expressed her true feelings when talking to Rhonda and Regina's family. She said that she had never been a bad person in her life and wished she could go back to that day, although she also admitted that it was impossible. The jury learned that the weapon used in the killings belonged to her partner, Henry Premont, with whom she had been living, and that she had taken the weapon without his knowledge. After the trial, Jodi Herring was found guilty of second-degree murder for the deaths of her cousins, Rhonda and Regina, as well as her aunt, Julianne Falzarano. She received a 20-year sentence for each life lost. Additionally, she was convicted of first-degree murder for the murder of Lara Sobel, resulting in a life sentence without the chance of parole. Later, she attempted to appeal her sentence, but the court denied her request due to concerns that she would remain a danger to herself and society. In conclusion, Jodi will spend the rest of her life in prison. Some may feel sympathy for her because she lost her children, but her cruel actions mean she will never see them again. This case has raised many questions about the role of social workers and how to prevent crimes linked to mental health. For instance, why was Jodi allowed to leave the psychiatric ward so soon despite her emotional instability? Would staying in treatment have made a difference? How did Jodi gain access to weapons, and are social workers being adequately protected from dangerous individuals? Jodi's actions have caused immense suffering, affecting both the Herring family and Lara's family, as well as her own. Lara's children will grow up without a mother, and Tiffany will suffer the effects of losing her family. After Lara's death, the University of Vermont, where she earned her degrees, offered full scholarships for her children to honor her. While improvements are slow, there is an ongoing effort to enhance the safety of social workers. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Judy Southern. Sometimes, from the very beginning of an investigation, everything seems to work out. The Supreme Court might directly point to a criminal, but practice shows that they are not always correct. While they tried to connect one person to the crime, the real culprit was walking free. Judy lived in Manhattan, New York, USA. She was a young woman who worked part-time at the post office. She always focused more on family and children than on career success. However, she wanted to get an education. Therefore, after graduating from high school, she entered college and successfully graduated. During this period, she met Alan Southern. They began a relationship and then got married. Judy and Alan lived together for more than 6 years. They raised a child together. From the outside, it seemed that everything was fine in their family, until one day that destroyed the entire family idyll. On June 7, 2000, Judy was in a good mood as she went to work in the morning, delivering mail around the area. At about 3:30 p.m., she returned home and, as always, found no one there yet. Judy arrived first and was getting ready for her husband to return from work. She had a 5-year-old son who was visiting his grandparents at that time. The boy was supposed to return in the evening. Once inside, Judy immediately noticed a strange mess on the kitchen table and found a suspicious note. She remembered that no one was there when she left for work. No one from the household could have come and left a message. Her husband was at work and never showed up during the day. Judy didn't have time to figure it all out, began to read the note, which turned out to have quite disturbing content. While she scanned the piece of paper, a stranger came out of a dark room and headed towards her, weapon at the ready. Without warning, he attacked her twice. The first bullet missed, but the second hit Judy in the lower abdomen. She fell to the floor and screamed in pain, losing consciousness. When she came to her senses, the attacker was nowhere to be seen. Judy barely reached the phone and tried to call her husband for help. But the phone was not working. She wanted to get to her mobile phone but could not remember where she left it. Fearing that the stranger might still be nearby, Judy crawled to the front door and carefully opened it. She stood up, leaning against the wall, left the house. Judy tried to attract the attention of others to scare off the criminal. She was bleeding and managed to walk only a couple of meters before she fell down exhausted. She knew her husband would be finishing work soon and would be near the house. That is exactly what happened. A few minutes later, he drove up in his car and immediately noticed his wife lying on the ground near the house. Judy was covered in blood but still alive. Alan picked her up and placed her in the back seat of the car. Judy was weak but tried to tell him about the attack. She pointed to the courtyard, but her husband still didn't understand what she wanted. There was no time to figure it out. Alan realized his wife's condition could be critical. Driving towards the hospital, Alan dialed 911, informed them that he had found his wife wounded near their house and was heading to the hospital. He asked them to meet them on the way. Judy was still conscious, said that a man had attacked her. She mentioned the name like Barry several times, claiming he had set up an ambush. By the time Judy arrived at the hospital, she had already lost consciousness. Doctors urgently took her to the operating room, but she died right on the table before receiving help. Her twin sister, Trudy Smith, arrived at the medical center a few minutes later. Alan informed her about the attack. She hurried because she wanted to support her sister. However, she doesn't have enough time. When Trudy received the tragic news of her sister's death, she approached Alan and accused him of what had happened. Alan seemed embarrassed. Trudy vowed to bring him to justice. The police immediately spoke to Alan, who became the main suspect. Because, typically, the closest people are involved in such cases. From the very beginning, Alan referenced Judy's own words about the shooting and the ambush organized by a certain Barry. The problem was that he did not know a single person among her acquaintances by that name. Trudy also could not recall anyone by that name. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined the crime scene and managed to find a considerable amount of evidence confirming that someone had indeed set up an ambush there and spent a significant amount of time in the house waiting for the victim. Such persistence seemed to indicate hatred, anger, and a personal motive. This only confirmed to the detectives that the criminal should be sought among the victim's immediate surroundings. Nothing was stolen from the house, so the robbery theory was immediately excluded. Mysterious Barry had taken a shower, played video games, and even found an adult toy belonging to Judy. It is not known what he did with it or why he left it in a prominent place in the bedroom. It became why Judy could not call from home for help. It was impossible because the killer had cut the phone line. He clearly wanted to deprive the victim of any chance to survive, and it worked. Doctors were sure that with timely assistance, she could have been saved. Despite the fact that the shot did not kill her immediately and she was able to leave the house, there was no one to help her. Unfortunately, she had to wait for Alan to arrive for some time, during which she lost a lot of blood. The detectives discovered traces of Alan, her husband. He continued to insist that he had nothing to do with the ambush. There were cigarette butts lying everywhere in the house, suggesting that the killer had smoked more than a pack of cigarettes while waiting for Judy. During the investigation, it turned out that neither the victim herself nor her husband smoked that brand of cigarettes, although this was not strong evidence of his innocence. This became the first piece of evidence in favor of Alan's alibi. It was strange that the criminal had entered the house without breaking in. Alan believed that all the windows and doors should have been closed before he left for work, but the shooter could have escaped through the window, which was wide open. During the searches, Alan remembered that his wife sometimes left the kitchen window slightly open to air out the house. This change in testimony was perceived as a very alarming sign. Spent cartridges were found at the scene of the crime. The first bullet hit a wooden wall. Flax was collected for further examination, and the police tried their best to find the weapon, but it was all in vain. Now, locating it had become a priority. It was believed that Alan managed to dispose of the gun, and naturally, he did not confess to this. Everything seemed to be against Alan. He was the first to report the incident and had spent the last minutes of Judy's life with her. His entire car was covered in blood, as were his hands and clothes. When Alan's office was searched, Even more suspicious evidence was found. A special device for recording calls was installed on the family's home phone. Thanks to it, Alan could listen to their conversations while at work, checking his suspicions. This immediately drew the attention of the authorities to Alan. This became a reason to increase pressure on him. The most curious piece of evidence was a note found at the scene, which appeared to be a suicide note, but not written by Judy or her husband. A new name also surfaced in this case, Jonathan. On the other hand, Alan and Judy had serious problems, which offered more reasons to commit a crime. The recordings of telephone conversations were linked to his attempts to catch his wife in infidelity. He planned to use all of this to gain an advantage in court during their pending divorce. As it turned out, both were unfaithful in their marriage. Alan had already had 2 mistresses, which Judy knew about. These affairs significantly contributed to the collapse of their marriage. At the time of the attack, Judy also had a lover. They contacted him, but the man's name was not Jonathan, and he did not appear to look like a killer from the beginning. All suspicions were removed when he provided a reliable alibi. Just 2 days before her death, Judy had called and complained about problems in the marriage, mentioning that they were even sleeping in different rooms, that for over a month, nothing had kept them together except for their 5-year-old son, Jacob. Judy had long wanted to file for divorce but saw how well her child was with his father and did not want to ruin that bond. Alan truly played a significant role in Jacob's life. However, this no longer mattered against the backdrop of constant quarrels. Judy could no longer tolerate the conflicts and was planning to file for divorce. It is obvious that this gave Alan more reasons for anger. He could have been jealous of her, fearing that he would lose his son or be forced to share custody or pay alimony. Trudy confirmed that they indeed had disputes about their child, and both wanted to obtain custody rights, making the divorce process expectedly difficult. Trudy, too, had reason to confront Alan with accusations right in the medical center. However, the most compelling and disturbing arguments for the investigation came from Judy's friends. Everyone knew that Judy had serious marital problems, but the situation was worse than it seemed. Judy had repeatedly stated that if something happened to her, Alan would definitely be guilty. The possibility of financial motives for the crime also emerged. As their relationship began to crumble, Alan could solve all his problems at once and gain some benefit. This turned out to be true because a life insurance policy for Judy was found during the investigation, with her husband and son as the beneficiaries. Of course, Alan denied everything. He was interrogated for hours, but he insisted that under no circumstances would he kill the mother of his child. He claimed that he loved his son too much to deprive him of the most valuable person in his son's life. According to the investigation, there was not enough evidence to bring charges. More material evidence was needed. At a minimum, it was necessary to wait for the results of all the examinations. Contrary to the detectives' expectations, doubts about the correctness of the choice of the main suspect arose with the first reports. The note found in the courtyard of the Southern house, identified as a suicide note, was signed by a certain Jonathan. However, the handwriting was not very legible, and the note itself was slightly contaminated with the blood of Judy. Complicating matters, it was clear that the note was addressed to a woman named Melanie and the letter was addressed to my wife, Melanie. At first, this confusion deepened because Melanie Southern did not exist, but there were other details in the letter, including an address that matched with Melanie Binney. This young woman lived at the location indicated in the note. She had a daughter and a husband named Jonathan Binney. The Binney family home was located approximately 5 kilometers from the ambush site where Judy was found. When the police checked Jonathan Binney in their database, it turned out that he fit the profile of the killer, as he had previously encountered problems with the law. Until recently, Jonathan had committed only minor offenses, but he was now under investigation for something far more serious. Shortly before Judy's death, he had abused his 3-month-old daughter. Initially, detectives believed that this note could have been written by Alan to mislead them and remove suspicion from himself. However, this clue needed proper analysis. In the suicide letter, Jonathan indicated that he wanted to leave this life voluntarily because he could not imagine being imprisoned for abusing a child. This all appeared suspicious when the detectives arrived at his house, where they found only his wife, Melanie. She admitted that he had not lived there since her statement about the child abuse case. Melanie was very angry with Jonathan. When she found out what happened to the Southern family, she was shocked because, in her opinion, Jonathan did not look like a killer, although she was no longer sure of anything. She was amazed at how close she had let a true madman, capable of such atrocities, into her life. She told the police where Jonathan could be, and the detectives arrived at the specified address. But even there, the suspect could not be found. Investigators contacted his close friends, but they also did not know where he could be. In the media, an alert was issued that a dangerous criminal was on the run, and they believed he could not have gone far. Additionally, considering the suicide note, they expected to find his lifeless body sooner. Tracking him down, the police used K-9 units with specially trained dogs and aerial support from police helicopters. The search took nearly a day until finally the dogs led the police to the basement of a house. There, Jonathan was found lying on the floor, shirtless, with 6 nicotine patches stuck to his chest. He was alive. The man told the police that he had attempted to take his own life by overdosing on nicotine. This was probably meant to convince everyone that he felt remorseful. Jonathan did not resist when he was arrested. He even seemed a little glad that it was all finally over. At the time of the crime, Jonathan Binney was 26 years old. His behavior raised doubts about his mental stability. Some suspected he might have mental issues. However, a psychiatric examination indicated that he was aware of his actions both during and after the crime. This led investigators to suspect that he was merely trying to elicit sympathy with his threats. Melanie provided detectives with writing samples that were analyzed by a handwriting expert. The expert found several significant characteristics that distinguished Jonathan's handwriting. He noted the similarity in the spelling of the lowercase g and f in the suicide note and in the samples. According to the analysis, there was almost a 100% probability that this letter was written by Jonathan himself. After this conclusion, the case against Alan began to collapse. Prior to Jonathan's arrest, the police had offered Alan a polygraph test. He agreed and passed with flying colors, which should have strengthened their confidence in his innocence, but they did not want to let him go. Alan was kept under suspicion until Jonathan confessed to attacking Judy, making it clear that Alan had no involvement in the crime. Alan was subsequently released. Another key piece of evidence was the DNA found on the toy in the house. The expert used dozens of filters to collect particles of saliva and skin from the killer, which also matched Jonathan's profile. This linked him to the crime scene. The day before Jonathan was arrested, the police found a 9mm handgun, a significant discovery. Despite a thorough search, they did not find this 9mm handgun registered to Alan. The gun was later confiscated and examined, but ballistics tests showed that it was not the weapon used to kill Judy. However, a dog team found another gun of the appropriate caliber in the woods near the house. Ballistics experts were now able to compare the bullets, cartridges, and guns. Tests were conducted. The markings on the bullets were then compared to objects from the scene of the massacre. The tests allowed investigators to prove that Judy was shot with this pistol. Fingerprints were found on the handle of the pistol, which also led to the arrest of a child abuser, Jonathan. During the search of Jonathan's house, police managed to find 9mm Cobra cartridges for a concealed carry pistol on the body under his clothing, as well as other evidence. All this confirmed that Jonathan was the weapon's owner. Melanie also told the police that he always carried a weapon with him, which he bought for self-defense. However, this had little effect on the situation with Alan. Even after that, he still looked suspicious. There were too many doubts against him because of the existing motive. Therefore, his status changed. It was now believed that he did not kill his wife with his own hands but became the mastermind behind the murder, using Jonathan as the executor. However, he refused to admit he didn't even know Jonathan. The theory that Alan hired Jonathan to kill his wife was also carefully investigated for a long time. The correspondence and calls were analyzed, but no connection leading Judy to Jonathan could be found. It seemed they were not acquainted at all. Against this backdrop, authorities tried to find at least some connection between the criminal and his victim in order to understand the motive for the attack. For a long time, it was thought this would help uncover Alan's involvement in the crime. It seemed suspicious that Judy called out a similar name before her death. Perhaps she really knew him or was trying to say something else, but her husband did not hear. The closest tie the police found was the period when Jonathan worked as a security guard at the library, where Judy occasionally borrowed books. They both had membership cards for the institution and exchanged pleasantries with each other. However, when questioned, the employees of the library could not remember any incidents involving Jonathan. The staff described Jonathan as a somewhat strange young man. While he worked as a security guard, he had no problems in his service record, at least none were known at his workplace. In fact, during this period, Jonathan had only minor offenses. When they questioned him about his job at the library, he could not recall anything that might connect him to Judy. Eventually, the detectives were forced to admit that this murder was a spontaneous act of aggression against an unknown person and a coincidence with Alan. All suspicions against Alan were dismissed. Jonathan was not familiar with Judy Southern, the choice of victim was random. He was merely driving around the city on his moped, looking for a suitable house to ambush. The Southern house seemed ideal to him, primarily because he spotted an open window that allowed for easy entry. Once inside the house, Jonathan clearly envisioned his actions. He had no specific target and was prepared to shoot whomever entered first, aiming to harm an innocent person. He smoked to ease his nerves. When it became he'd have to wait, he played video games and rummaged through the rooms. He never commented on Judy's abandoned adult toy. When Jonathan discovered that Judy had a husband and a 5-year-old son at the time, he claimed he would have shot any of them without discrimination or hesitation, even a child, if they had entered the house. Jonathan also confessed to abusing a 3-month-old child. Due to the ongoing investigation, he later told the authorities that he did not want to go to jail for child abuse, especially considering the familial ties and age of the victim. He was aware of how badly prisoners with such convictions were treated and described in detail the suffering caused by his fear of incarceration. Therefore, he sought a way to remedy the situation. Jonathan decided to go to jail as a murderer. He likely did not realize that he would be tried for both crimes and face 2 sentences, making it impossible to entirely hide his dark past. While in the ambush house, Jonathan altered his plan and decided to take his own life after committing the murder, so he didn't particularly care about leaving evidence. With these thoughts, he even wrote a suicide note. He spent several days behind bars and eventually told the police, without waiting for his lawyer, that he wanted to officially plead guilty to Judy's murder. Jonathan was not planning to deny his guilt regarding the abuse of a 3-month-old. His conscience was eating away at him, and he was ready to talk to detectives again. The entire local community was shocked by what had happened, especially Melanie, who had already suffered greatly. The media eagerly reported that a 3-month-old baby had been abused by her own father. Authorities feared public unrest and felt compelled to provide increased protection for the criminal. When Melanie learned that her husband was willing to kill any person, even a child, to avoid jail time for his shameful crime, she desperately wanted him imprisoned forever, or better yet, sentenced to death, so that this bloody chaos would end as soon as possible. Given the evidence collected, even without a confession, Jonathan Binney faced little chance of receiving a lenient sentence. He was found guilty of murdering Judy Southern and abusing a baby, receiving the highest punishment before being placed on death row. The court's decision elicited strong reactions from both the killer's wife and the family of the deceased, who finally breathed a sigh of relief and continued to raise their children. Jonathan's lawyer fought for a temporary reprieve, even managing to secure one at first, and subsequently signed a written agreement with the authorities stating that he would never again appeal the sentence if the death penalty were commuted to life imprisonment without the chance of parole. This agreement worked. Jonathan Binney is now serving a life sentence and remains behind bars. At 17, Madison Skimitz thought her greatest pain was just a broken teenage romance. Little did she know that, for someone else, the word breakup would become the pretext for extreme obsession, hatred, and violence, and that the best decision of her life, leaving a toxic relationship, almost cost her everything. In just a few short minutes in a parking lot, Madison was stabbed 17 times. Her mother used her own body to shield her, while a stranger bravely rushed in to prevent the tragedy. Blood was spilled, screams rang out, and from that moment, the fates of many took a different turn. This is not just the story of a brutal attack. This is a journey from obsession to miracle, from despair to extraordinary willpower, and a chilling warning about the terrible price of ignored obsession. What happened on June 3, 2023, and how did a girl who was declared never to walk again manage to stand up, step by step, to the astonishment of the world? Madison Skimitz is an American teenager living in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. She attended Ponte Vedra High School, where she was known for being friendly and outgoing, with a bright future ahead. Like many of her peers, she also experienced the ups and downs of first love. In late 2022, Madison started dating Spencer Pearson. For 6 months, they were together like any other teenage couple. But by April 2023, Madison realized the relationship was unhealthy and decided to end it. She never imagined that this action would lead to a series of traumatic and violent events that nearly took everything from her. Spencer refused to accept the breakup. From April through early June, he began stalking and harassing Madison. He kept sending her harassing messages and even showed up at places she often went to. Those actions showed that he had no intention of letting her live her life in peace. The harassment escalated, causing Madison and her family to fear for her safety. This was no longer the impulsive reaction of a heartbroken teenager after a breakup, but rather disturbing and potentially dangerous behavior. Madison confided in friends about her fears, and her mother, Jacqueline Rogue, grew increasingly alarmed. In late April, Spencer's mental health deteriorated further. He posted a disturbing photo on Snapchat showing a tie around his neck and tears on his face. The picture terrified everyone. It could have been a plea for help, a manipulative act, or both. But it was certainly a sign of his mental instability. His family took him for evaluation, and he was hospitalized for 5 days with diagnoses of severe depression, social anxiety, and autism. Despite his parents' efforts, the hospitalization didn't resolve his obsession. After being released, Spencer's fixation on Madison only intensified. He continued to stalk her, his behavior becoming increasingly frightening. Madison tried to live normally, spending time with friends, going to school, and preparing for her senior year, but she couldn't shake her constant worry about what Spencer might do next. Sadly, that fear would soon prove justified. On June 3, 2023, Madison planned to meet her mother and friends for lunch at Mr. Chubby's Wings, a casual local restaurant. It was meant to be a simple, pleasant afternoon. Madison and her mom arrived, joined their friends, and for a while, everything felt normal. The atmosphere was relaxed, the food good, and laughter filled the table. About 30 minutes after the meal began, Madison noticed someone watching her from across the restaurant. It was Spencer Pearson. His appearance was no accident. Security cameras later showed that he approached near Madison's table soon after entering, ensuring she saw him. Even on video, Madison's fear was obvious. She and her mother exchanged anxious looks. They had talked before about this possibility. Their plan was clear: leave immediately, don't engage, and get to safety. Madison's friend Casey Estep recalled how Madison and her mother suddenly insisted they had to go right away. Their voices were urgent, their eyes panicked. They quickly asked for the bill, trying to leave the restaurant without attracting attention. Madison's heart was racing as they gathered their things, determined to avoid a confrontation. The plan was simple: get to the car and drive away. But Spencer had been watching them from a window. As soon as Madison and her mother, Jacqueline, stepped outside, he ran after them. What happened in that parking lot was an act of brutal, sudden violence, so shocking that witnesses could barely comprehend what they were seeing. Spencer attacked Madison from behind with a large folding knife his parents had given him. A knife engraved with his personal information. He forced her to the ground and began stabbing her with terrifying intensity. The assault was deliberate, brutal, and meant to kill. Spencer stabbed Madison 17 times, striking her neck, back, and torso. Each blow was aimed to end her life. Madison screamed as witnesses stood frozen in shock. Her mother, Jacqueline Roger, faced with every parent's worst nightmare, rushed in to protect her daughter. Jacqueline threw herself between Spencer and Madison, trying to pull him away. She hit, grabbed, and shielded her daughter with her own body. In response, Spencer turned the knife on Jacqueline, stabbing her in the forehead, hand, and leg. Despite her injuries and heavy bleeding, Jacqueline kept fighting. Determined to save Madison, they probably wouldn't have survived if Kennedy Armstrong, a 22-year-old restaurant manager, hadn't just driven into the parking lot at that moment. Hearing the shouts, Kennedy ran toward the chaos without hesitation. He tackled Spencer to the ground with full force, separating him from Madison and Jacqueline. But Spencer tried to rise again. Still holding the knife, Kennedy tackled him a second time, pinning his arms and preventing another attack. As Kennedy held Spencer and glanced at Madison and Casey, Spencer unexpectedly wounded himself. Those around quickly rushed forward, disarming him before he could inflict a fatal injury. The parking lot was covered in blood. Madison lay on the ground, gravely wounded from 17 stab wounds. Jacqueline was bleeding but conscious, her instinct to protect her daughter keeping her going. Armstrong suffered an injured hand from Spencer's knife damage that would later require several surgeries. Spencer, bleeding from his self-inflicted wounds, was finally subdued. Emergency crews arrived within minutes. Paramedics focused on Madison, whose injuries were catastrophic. One stab had pierced her spinal cord. As they worked to stabilize her, the grim truth became clear. Even if she survived, her life would never be the same. Madison was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Surgeons saved her life, but the spinal cord injury left her paralyzed from the chest down. The knife cut the nerve pathways between her brain and her lower body. For a teenage girl who had been active and independent only hours earlier, the diagnosis was devastating. Madison would never walk again. The activities she once loved, running, dancing, and simply moving freely, were no longer possible. Her senior year, once filled with plans for prom and college, would instead revolve around hospitals, rehabilitation, and learning to adapt to a new reality. Though doctors worked tirelessly to repair her physical wounds, the psychological trauma was immense. Madison had been betrayed by someone she once trusted, attacked without warning, and nearly killed in a public place under the bright light of day. Jacqueline eventually healed from her physical injuries, the stab wounds to her forehead, hand, and leg. But her emotional wounds ran much deeper. She had fought fiercely to protect her daughter, but couldn't prevent the devastating spinal injury. The guilt and the horrific memories of that day continue to haunt her. Kennedy had a long and difficult recovery ahead of him. Nerve damage in his hand forced him to undergo multiple surgeries and rehabilitation sessions. His courage and quick thinking had unquestionably saved Madison's life. If he hadn't tackled Spencer when he did, the attack might have been fatal. Even so, Kennedy was left with his own physical pain and emotional scars from those terrifying moments. As news of the attack spread, the community came together in support of Madison's family. A GoFundMe campaign helped cover the growing medical expenses, and friends organized vigils. The support was overwhelming, but it couldn't undo what had been done. Madison's life had been changed forever by senseless violence. Spencer survived his self-inflicted injuries and was arrested. He faced 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder and 1 count of aggravated battery causing serious bodily harm. The evidence was irrefutable, from surveillance cameras and witness testimony to the murder weapon itself. Yet for Madison's family, the legal process mattered less than the daily challenge of rebuilding their lives. Madison began months of intensive physical therapy, learning to use a wheelchair and adapting to a body that could no longer move as before. Each day brought new frustrations and heartbreak. Doctors confirmed what she understood but didn't want to believe. Paralysis was permanent, and no surgery could repair a severed spinal cord. She will have to rely on a wheelchair for the rest of her life, and will need help from others with basic daily activities. However, Madison was stronger than anyone imagined. Even she herself didn't realize it. Over the next 11 months, she defied every expectation. The teenager who had been told she would never walk again decided that wasn't going to be her story. She vowed to prove the doctors wrong. She would walk again. Before graduation, rehabilitation was grueling beyond imagination. Every day, Madison worked with therapists, pushing her body to the limit. The pain was unbearable, and progress came painfully slow, measured in tiny, almost invisible improvements. There were setbacks and moments of despair, times when recovery seemed impossible. Still, Madison never gave up. She found strength in her mother, who had put herself between her daughter and a knife. She drew inspiration from Kennedy, who had risked his life for a stranger, and she discovered within herself a deep well of resilience she hadn't known existed. Gradually, almost impossibly, Madison began to regain movement. It started small, a toe twitch, a faint muscle contraction. Her therapists worked tirelessly, stimulating muscles and retraining neural pathways to find new routes. Doctors watched her in awe. This wasn't supposed to happen. Severed spinal cords don't heal. Paralyzed teens don't walk again. But Madison was rewriting the rules. Month by month, her strength returned. First came small leg movements, then standing with support, then taking one step, then another. The wheelchair that had once seemed permanent became something she used less and less. Therapy sessions that used to leave her drained began to show real, measurable results. Her doctors called it remarkable. Her therapists called it extraordinary. Her family called it a miracle. Madison called it the hardest, most important thing she had ever done. At graduation in May 2024, less than a year after the attack that left Madison paralyzed, she walked onto the stage to receive her diploma at Ponte Vedra High School. She walked unaided, head held high, her smile radiant. The auditorium erupted in applause. Many people were moved to tears, deeply touched by Madison's strength and extraordinary determination. Her walk was not just a personal triumph, but a declaration that violence is not the end, and that the human spirit can overcome even the most devastating trauma. In each step, Madison embodied hope and strength, refusing to let her attacker dictate her future. While Madison focused on recovery, the criminal case progressed. In July 2024, just over a year after the attack, Spencer changed his plea from not guilty to guilty on all charges. At the November 2024 sentencing hearing, the courtroom was filled with family, friends, supporters, and media. Following Madison's inspiring recovery, Spencer's defense attorneys asked the judge for leniency, citing his youth, mental health struggles, lack of violent history, and conditions such as depression, anxiety, and autism. They argued he needed specialized treatment rather than a lifetime in prison. Judge Lee R. Smith acknowledged Spencer's mental health challenges and age, but emphasized that these factors could not excuse his actions. Then Madison addressed the court. She recounted the moment she realized she was paralyzed, the months of excruciating rehabilitation, and the daily pain that followed. She spoke of losing the ability to perform simple tasks and described her condition as a life sentence. Urging the judge to give Spencer the same, Madison's mother, Jacqueline Roje, described the terror of watching her daughter being attacked and the lasting trauma it caused. Nightmares, constant fear, and a life forever changed. Kennedy Armstrong, who intervened during the attack, spoke of his injuries, his decision to act, and his anger at watching Spencer destroy Madison's future. Because he couldn't accept a breakup, Spencer apologized, claiming deep remorse and acknowledging that June 3rd was the worst day of everyone's lives, including his own. But Judge Smith stated that remorse could not outweigh the severity and lasting harm of the crime. Some acts, he said, demand the harshest penalty. He noted that without Kennedy's bravery and Jacqueline's quick actions, Spencer would have succeeded in killing Madison, Judge Smith sentenced Spencer Pearson to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the judge announced the sentence, Spencer's family wept, while Madison's family embraced one another in relief. After 538 days, they finally felt that justice had been served. Soon after, Madison and Jacqueline filed a civil lawsuit seeking damages from Spencer, his parents, and Mr. Chubby's Wings restaurant. The lawsuit argued that Spencer's parents were aware of his mental health issues, but still allowed him access to the knife used in the attack. It also claimed the restaurant failed to provide proper security and did not contact the police after Madison and her mother warned staff that they were afraid of Spencer. The case highlighted how acts of violence often stem from a series of preventable failures that ultimately lead to tragedy. Today, Madison continues both her recovery and her advocacy work. Physical therapy is an ongoing process, and maintaining her mobility requires lifelong effort. The psychological scars will likely never fade completely. She still experiences nightmares, fear, and days when the emotional weight feels unbearable. Yet, there are also moments of joy, achievement, and hope. Madison's story has touched the hearts of countless people who are inspired by her refusal to let what happened define them. She demonstrates that surviving, recovering, and thriving are distinct but all possible. Even after immense trauma, Madison now advocates for victims of domestic violence and stalking, using her platform to raise awareness about warning signs and the importance of taking threats seriously. On social media, Madison documents her ongoing journey, not for attention, but to encourage others facing their own struggles. Her posts reveal the hard work of therapy, moments of progress, setbacks, and ultimately, a life being fully lived, rather than merely endured. Spencer Pearson will have to spend the rest of his life in prison. His obsession has utterly destroyed his own future. Just as he attempted to destroy Madison's, his case stands as a severe reminder of the dangers of untreated mental health crises. Meanwhile, Kennedy Armstrong and Jacqueline Roget received the Carnegie Medal, one of North America's highest honors for civilian heroism, for their split-second, selfless actions that saved Madison's life. Madison herself is perhaps the least impressed by her achievements, seeing her recovery simply as doing what was necessary. But to those who know her story, she represents something profound, proof that the human spirit can endure and rise above even the darkest attempts to destroy it. She walked when doctors said she never would. She smiled when despair seemed inevitable. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Fernando Pastorizo. A young couple in love found themselves in a toxic relationship that ended in tragedy. The investigation revealed that the situation was more complicated than it appeared, with disturbing secrets emerging. Nahir Galarza was born on September 11, 1998, in Gualeguaychú, Argentina, a city of about 100,000 residents known for its vibrant carnivals and its proximity to Uruguay. From a young age, Nahir was sociable and cheerful. She had a younger brother, who was 3 years her junior. Unlike Nahir, her younger brother faced developmental challenges and struggled with learning, eventually receiving a diagnosis of a disability. Nahir excelled in school and found learning languages easy. Their family was considered exemplary and happy, maintaining a well-organized home life. Their mother emphasized cleanliness, and Nahir developed a strong obsession with order, tidiness, and the habit of washing hands regularly. Her father was a police officer, and while the parents were strict, they indulged their children. Nahir aspired to become a lawyer, and after finishing high school, enrolled in the law program at Concepción del Uruguay University. She was also passionate about sports, play field hockey, engaging in daily training and massages to stay fit, and she enjoyed a vibrant social life filled with friends and parties. In 2012, when she was 14, Nahir met 15-year-old Fernando Gabriel Pastorizo at a bowling alley. Fernando, born on January 3, 1997, in Gualeguaychú, Argentina, was a cheerful and active young man from a respectable family who loved animals. This caught Nahir's attention, and they began dating. However, their relationship was tumultuous, characterized by frequent arguments and breakups that would be resolved just a few days later. Both were jealous and suspicious, which fueled their conflicts. In 2016, they went on a family trip to Brazil, during which they managed to enjoy their time together with hardly any disputes. It seemed like their relationship was improving, but issues continued to arise, and they still had cycles of arguing, breaking up, and reconciling. On Christmas Eve 2017, both Nahir and Fernando attended a party, but they arrived separately with their friends after having fought earlier. During the party, a brawl broke out between Fernando and another guy. The exact reason for the fight remains unclear, as Nahir, Fernando, and their friends provided conflicting explanations. Fernando claimed he was severely beaten, while Nahir stated that Fernando became jealous of her and started the altercation with the guy. On December 28, 2017, Nahir went for a massage. After her session, she discovered that her phone was dead. Remembering that she had left her charger at Fernando's home, she decided to go there and stayed the night. The next morning, Fernando drove her home on his motorcycle. Unfortunately, at dawn, a taxi driver discovered Fernando bleeding and called the police and an ambulance. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. Fernando had died. The police discovered that he had been attacked twice near his motorcycle. News of the incident spread quickly, and at 7 a.m., Nahir, just waking up, learned about it. She posted a picture of them together on her social media, writing, "5 years together, quarrels and breakups, reconciliations, but always with love. I love you forever, my angel." Fernando's mother called Nahir to ask what had happened, but Nahir was unsure. Meanwhile, the police began gathering evidence at the crime scene and launched a murder investigation. Initially, they thought it might be a robbery, but this theory was ruled out since Fernando's money had not been taken. The area was typically calm and safe, with a low crime rate, raising questions about who could have killed Fernando and why. Investigators discovered that Fernando had been attacked with a 9mm pistol, a type of weapon usually used by police. This raised suspicions that a police officer might be involved. It was established that Fernando was first shot from behind at close range, likely by someone who approached him unnoticed. The assailant then moved in closer and shot him in the heart. Could the attacker have been someone he knew? This possibility was reinforced by the discovery of a second helmet at the scene. The police began reviewing surveillance footage from the area and saw a girl leaving the scene at 5:22 a.m., but her face was not visible. Nahir soon became a suspect and was summoned to the police station for questioning. During the interview, she confidently claimed that Fernando had driven her home that night. She stated that she showered, went to bed, and later woke up to the news of the tragedy. She expressed her sorrow for Fernando in a social media post. Nahir appeared very distressed and was crying, leading the investigators to have no further questions for her. The police decided to interrogate Nahir's father, Marcelo Galarza, who is a police officer. He initially claimed he didn't know anyone named Fernando, but this was later proven false when photos from their trip to Brazil surfaced, showing them together. It became clear that Nahir's father was well acquainted with Fernando, leading to questions about why he lied. The police began to suspect that he might be involved in the crime, prompting his denial of knowing Fernando. They developed a theory that pointed to Marcelo's involvement, especially after discovering evidence related to a weapon. Forensic tests confirmed that this weapon belonging to Nahir's father was the weapon used to kill Fernando, making him the main suspect. Investigators considered possible motives, suspecting that he may have disliked Fernando because of his daughter's relationship with Fernando, which might have led to a confrontation that ended fatally. Then came a surprising twist. Nahir confessed to killing Fernando to protect her father, who was on the verge of being arrested. She claimed that Fernando had subjected her to physical violence, alleging that on the night of the incident, he had grabbed her hair and dragged her home, prompting her to attack him. However, questions arose about how she obtained a weapon for this act. It became evident that this was a premeditated action, as she had brought a weapon with her. Nahir had stolen her father's service pistol, which he kept in the fridge, and returned it after the murder, leaving her parents completely unaware. She was recorded on surveillance footage. When the police questioned her about why she fled and attempted to hide evidence, not contacting the police or an ambulance if she was innocent, Nahir explained that she was confused. At that moment, she didn't believe Fernando would die and didn't grasp the seriousness of the situation. Upon realizing that she had killed him, she became very distressed. Her friends and Fernando's friends provided conflicting accounts. Nahir's friends blamed Fernando, citing her frequent complaints about him, while his friends accused Nahir. Some even noted that their relationship was difficult to define, as they spent more time apart than together. Nahir had 5 other boyfriends, and Fernando likely had other girlfriends as well. Their messages were examined, revealing that Fernando appeared to be more of a victim in their relationship. Nahir was aggressive and threatened him, while the kind-hearted Fernando confided in friends about being physically abused when he tried to break up with her. He was exhausted from the relationship and sought a peaceful life without her. This may have motivated Nahir to kill him, driven by a desire for revenge over his wish to end their relationship. Later, Nahir claimed that she accidentally attacked Fernando while she was holding the weapon. She stated that they both fell off the motorcycle, and that was when the gun fired for the first time. After this, she picked up the weapon and accidentally shot him again. This explanation seemed highly unlikely. A ballistic expert stated that it was impossible for there to be 2 accidental shots. Even if the first shot was an accident, the second shot was definitely intentional. Surveillance footage showed her walking home at a normal pace, covering more than 20 blocks, which contradicted her claim of being in shock and confusion after the accidental attacking. A handwriting expert analyzed Nahir's writing and found that she displayed significant emotional instability, along with self-centered and manipulative traits. Her handwriting indicated egocentrism, a craving for attention, mood swings, impulsiveness, aggressiveness, a tendency to lie, and a desire for dominance and manipulation. Her handwriting also revealed that she was experiencing considerable emotional turmoil. Nahir was more complicated than she initially appeared. She had a contradictory, complex, pushy, and aggressive personality. It was discovered that at the age of 16, she had pulled a prank on her parents by faking her own kidnapping, leaving them terrified and shocked when they realized it was a joke. Before the trial, she underwent a psychiatric evaluation. The psychiatrist reported that she exhibited complete narcissism, was quick to anger, aggressive, and showed no remorse for her actions. Besides, she was diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, which was linked to her desire for control. During the trial, Nahir displayed defiant behavior. She arrived in shorts, looked down on others with arrogance, frequently adjusted her hair, and flirted with those around her. Although she maintained that her actions were in self-defense, nobody found her story credible. Her father initially supported her, but later distanced himself from her. There was no evidence indicating that Nahir had experienced physical abuse from Fernando. The prosecution outlined the following events. Around 2 a.m., Fernando was driving Nahir home. Upon arriving, they entered an apartment and argued for about 2 hours. Fernando wanted to end their relationship, but Nahir disagreed. During this time, she secretly took her father's weapon, and they left for another location. While traveling down a dark, deserted street, Nahir asked Fernando to stop. She got off the motorcycle, attacked him in the back, and when he fell, she attacked him again. Afterward, she returned home. Once there, she took a shower to clean off the blood and gun residue from her hands, returned her father's gun to the fridge, changed her clothes, and went to sleep. On July 3, 2018, Nahir Galarza was found guilty of aggravated murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 35 years. This means she could be released when she is 54 years old. At 19, Nahir has become the youngest person in Argentina to receive a life sentence. She has filed 3 appeals against her conviction, but all have been denied, leaving the sentence unchanged. At this time, Nahir changed her statement. She claims that she is not guilty at all, and her father is the real killer, as he attacked Fernando. One interesting thing is that there is surveillance footage showing Nahir at home during the time of the murder, raising questions about her alibi. Her mother, Yamina Crow, who divorced Nahir's father, supports her daughter and believes in her innocence. Nahir has stated that she was afraid of her father and her uncle, who abused her, which led her to take the blame for the crime. She expresses concern for her mother and brother's safety. Nahir has also filed a lawsuit against her uncle. The case has attracted significant public attention, with mixed reactions from the community. Some people are indifferent, while others support Nahir and believe she is innocent. Conversely, some argue that she not only killed Fernando, but also ruined her own life. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Laverne K. Parsons. Laverne K. Parsons and Rebecca Sears were neighbors who developed a strong friendship, becoming almost like sisters. Rebecca had a good relationship with both Laverne and her husband, David Parsons. However, their bond evolved into a mutual dependence that hinted at deeper issues. This marked the beginning of a troubling story that would have a significant impact on their entire town. In Grovetown, Georgia, USA, a worker called the emergency services. The dispatcher reported that the front door of the Parsons home was damaged, which looked like a break-in. Concerned about a crime, the worker alerted the police. When officers arrived, they found the house open and moved toward the garage. Inside, they discovered the front door smeared with blood, along with large amounts of blood on the walls and floor. In the middle of the garage, there was a woman's body, so badly mutilated that it looked as if she had been attacked by a bear. As the investigation unfolded, more horrific details about the incident emerged. In the spring of 2005, the Parsons family relocated to Grovetown, Georgia. This small town, with a population of about 15,000, was known for its peaceful and friendly atmosphere, making it one of the safest places in the state. The family, consisting of husband David, wife Laverne, and their 12-year-old son, had just settled into their new home. David, a career military man, had recently retired and was now working for a logistics. David and Laverne had been in love since high school, starting their relationship when Laverne was 17. Now, as a family with a growing son, they were filled with hope for their future in this community. Shortly after the Parsons moved in, they met their new neighbors, Tony and Rebecca Sears, who lived next door. The Sears family had 5 children, 2 of whom were adults from Rebecca's previous marriage. Rebecca worked as a manager at a medical center, while Tony was a truck driver. They had lived in the area for most of their lives and were known for being friendly and kind. Rebecca's older sons, Michael and Christopher Bowers, had taken different paths in life. Christopher, who had a stable job at the same clinic as his mother, lived independently and spent his free time on his motorcycle. In contrast, Michael struggled with serious substance abuse issues. He often faced difficulties and had trouble finding work, relying on his parents for support while living at home. Despite this, Rebecca consistently helped him by bringing him to her office, where he occasionally found odd jobs, such as mowing lawns or taking out the trash, earning small tips for his work. During one of the office visits, some money went missing. The management suspected Michael, who had a troubled past and struggled with addiction, of stealing it. Although they couldn't prove anything, and he was not formally charged, the situation cast a shadow over the Sears family. This is a common issue in small towns. Everyone knows each other's business, and even minor troubles can spark rumors. Despite this, the friendship between the new neighbors, who were unaware of the Sears family's difficulties, continued to grow. After they moving in, Rebecca helped her new friend find a job at the physical therapy office, which brought them closer together. They began to spend a lot of time together, enjoying daily conversations and bonding. Later, the whole group went on a cruise where they played doubles tennis, becoming best friends and nearly inseparable. Everything seemed perfect until a tragedy struck in 2009, revealing the true nature of the deceitful criminal hiding behind the facade of a respectable person. Laverne started receiving anonymous text messages on her phone suggesting that her husband was cheating on her with her best friend, Rebecca. Laverne brought this up with Rebecca, but Rebecca dismissed it as a bad joke. Despite Rebecca's denial, the rumors spread, and soon everyone in town was talking about it. Laverne then confronted her husband to discover the truth, but he denied any wrongdoing. However, this still unsettled Laverne and distressed her. Although they had previously enjoyed a good relationship, mistrust began to grow after the messages. Later, Rebecca felt guilty and confessed to her husband that she had indeed been having an affair with their neighbor. She reassured him that it was over and took responsibility for her actions, admitting that the affair had lasted several months. Rebecca apologized to her husband, believing that by doing so, she was easing her conscience. She failed to realize that her husband would be shocked by the revelation and wouldn't simply overlook it. After hearing Rebecca's confession, her husband called Laverne to tell her about his wife's infidelity, revealing that Rebecca had cheated on him with Laverne's husband. Laverne confronted her husband and told him that she had discovered his lie. David apologized, wanting to save their marriage for their son's sake, and she forgave him. Afterward, Laverne decided to quit her job to avoid seeing her husband's mistress and cut off all communication with their neighbors. She even considered selling their house to move far away from the Sears family and start fresh. However, after the house was listed for sale, a series of events began to unfold with tragic results. About a month passed without any contact between the former best friends. During this time, David was on a business trip in California. One evening, he called his wife, but after a short conversation, he broke down and called their neighbor, Rebecca. He confessed to her that he still had feelings for her and wanted to be with her. Their conversation quickly turned into flirting, and then phone intimate. Unknowingly, David triggered a series of events that would lead to serious consequences. The next morning, March 25, 2009, David called his wife, but she didn't answer. This was unusual because she was not working that day and was usually home. After several attempts to reach Laverne, he called her friend Tamara to see if she knew where Laverne was, but Tamara had no information. He then called Rebecca, but she said she also hadn't heard from Laverne. Hours passed without any contact. That morning, a repairman arrived at the Parsons house to complete a repair. He knocked on the front door, but no one answered. He tried calling the homeowner's mobile phones, but they didn't respond. Concerned, he went around to the back door and noticed that the glass was broken, with shards scattered on the floor, and there were visible bloodstains just inside the door. Realizing that something was wrong, the repairman chose not to enter the house and instead called emergency services. Within minutes, the nearest police patrol and ambulance arrived. When the officers entered the house, they followed the blood trails on the floor, which led them to the garage. There, they found Laverne lying in a pool of blood, with a bloody hammer and baseball bat next to her. The paramedics detected a faint pulse and quickly transported her to the hospital's intensive care unit, where doctors worked to save her life. The police investigated the crime scene and found no evidence of abuse assault on the victim. However, several valuable items, including a gold necklace and a watch, were missing, and the house was in chaos. The bedroom mattress had been overturned, and all the drawers were pulled out. Notably, cash and other valuables were left untouched, leading the police to conclude that this was not a typical burglary, as real burglars usually take cash. It appeared that the scene of the struggle had been staged, so investigators considered it a violent attack with the intent to kill rather than a robbery. A woman was intentionally attacked in her home, shocking the detectives with the brutality of the crime. Later, a neighbor named Rebecca called the police to report a burglary at her house. Fortunately, Rebecca and her family were not home, and nothing was stolen. It seemed the burglar had been frightened off and left without taking anything. This raised questions for the detectives. Could this incident really have been a simple burglary? Meanwhile, Laverne was fighting for her life in the hospital, and the police hoped she would recover enough to provide information about her attacker. Unfortunately, her injuries were too severe, and the doctors were not optimistic about her recovery. Her husband was informed of the attack and rushed to the hospital. When he arrived, doctors told him she had no chance of waking up and could only be kept alive by machines. After careful consideration, he made the painful decision to turn off his wife's life support. Laverne, 41, died in the hospital just a day after the emergency call was made. The first person the police interrogated was the repairman who discovered the break-in at the house and called for emergency services. This incident occurred at 8:30 in the morning, which seemed unusually early for such work to the detectives. Raising their suspicions, they found it odd that he was walking around the house, especially since he shouldn't have been attempting to enter through the back door. The police brought him in for questioning. The worker explained that he arrived early because that was the time agreed upon with Laverne, and he went to the back door because that was where he was scheduled to work. The Parsons family were preparing to tidy up parts of the house before selling it. The repairman passed the polygraph test, and his testimony was convincing, so he was quickly cleared as a suspect. However, he did provide the police with an important lead. While speaking with the emergency dispatcher, he noticed a suspicious young man sitting on the curb across the street from the house. When the police arrived, this young man mentioned that his house had also been robbed. The officers recognized him as 22-year-old Michael Bowers, Rebecca's eldest son, and confirmed that there were indeed signs of a break-in at his home. From the start of the investigation, Michael, the troubled son of the Sears family, kept coming up in the case. His behavior was puzzling. Could he really have taken a hammer and then a baseball bat to nearly kill the neighbor before casually crossing the street to rob his own house? He was present at both crime scenes until the police arrived, which seemed very strange. However, given his issues with illegal substances, his actions were unpredictable. The police decided to interview each member of the Sears family individually to compare their statements for consistency. The family patriarch was away on a trip and could not be questioned. The first person interviewed was Christopher, the 19-year-old brother, who appeared very anxious. He explained that he had left home early that morning with their mother to go to work at the medical center and was far from home at the time of the crime. Christopher quickly began to point fingers at Michael, claiming that his brother, who struggled with addiction, often acted inappropriately and aggressively, which could have triggered the conflict. Christopher believed that Michael's substance abuse might have pushed him toward violent behavior. Next in the interrogation room was the suspect, Michael, who appeared unwell. He surprised the investigators by confessing to his banned substance addiction. Michael acknowledged that his addiction was harmful, and he expressed that he needed help because he couldn't manage it on his own. He also admitted to using substances on the same day as the interrogation. Desperate, he felt that he had no choice. If he didn't use, he would face withdrawal symptoms during his conversation with the detectives, making it impossible for him to speak. On the day of the crime, Michael left home early in the morning to look for a job at his father's suggestion, but he was unsuccessful. When he returned at 8:30, he found the back door of his house forced open, indicating a possible burglary. Surprised, he called his mother to inform her about the break-in. While waiting for her to arrive, he began to inspect the area around the house. During this time, a repairman showed up at the neighboring house. A few minutes later, police sirens were heard, and officers arrived on the scene. Because of this, Michael chose not to enter his house and instead waited outside, thinking the events were connected. At the crime scene, a patrolman asked Michael to show the soles of his shoes. A detective noticed a shard of glass lodged in the tread, which Michael could not explain. It was likely just a random piece of glass he stepped on while checking the area. Overall, he appeared clean and had no blood on him, but the police began to doubt his story. As a result, he became the main suspect in the murder case. Michael denied any involvement in the burglary or the murder of his neighbor. The police discovered that he had legal troubles and struggled with sobriety. They also learned that his mother planned to kick him out of the house due to her frustration with supporting him. This situation raised suspicions that he might have committed a crime out of desperation. The next person to be questioned was Christopher. He confirmed Michael's alibi with precise timing, stating that he saw Michael leave home for his part-time job. As a result, the police had to release Michael as a suspect. The younger children were not interrogated due to their age. During her questioning, Rebecca appeared upset and expressed concern about what had happened, asking about her friend's condition. However, her emotional response seemed insincere. Despite this, she had a strong alibi. She was at work during the time of the attack. While the investigation was still underway, another crime occurred just 36 hours after the murder. The victim this time was Rebecca Sears. One evening, as she was leaving her office, a dark-skinned man approached her with a weapon and demanded money. When she refused, he attacked her in the leg and threatened that next time he would attack her in the face if she didn't comply, then fled the scene. Terrified, Rebecca called the police. Fortunately, her injuries were not life-threatening. In less than 3 days, 2 attempted robberies and murders had occurred, involving 2 families who were once close friends and neighbors. What had gone wrong in this quiet suburb? The detectives faced the difficult task of solving this complicated mystery. Meanwhile, the funeral for Laverne, who had been brutally murdered, took place. One of her friends spoke with the grieving widower, David, who appeared deeply affected by his loss and was openly crying. However, he made a remark that raised suspicion, saying he never would have wanted things to end this way. Some witnesses found his words sincere, while others thought they hinted at his possible involvement in the crime. With many rumors circulating about the 2 families, every statement from David became fodder for speculation. The police soon caught wind of this and began to view David as a potential suspect, as cases of spouses killing each other are not uncommon. However, the detectives lacked evidence against him, and David had a credible alibi. He was confirmed to be on a business trip in another state at the time of the murder. The investigator considered the possibility that he might have been involved in the murder, specifically as the organizer of the crime, by looking into details of his life. They called him in for questioning. He truthfully admitted to having an affair with his neighbor Rebecca, which his wife had recently discovered. Despite this, they chose not to divorce and instead decided to work through their issues together. They even started planning to move, which is why he had placed an advertisement to sell their house. The husband maintained that he was not involved in his wife's murder, stating that he loved her even though he was seeing the neighbor. Unexpected assistance in the investigation came from an unexpected source. the police station received a call from a prison inmate. He wanted to share information about the murder. He is Rebecca Sears' cousin. The inmate revealed that just before the incident, Rebecca had confided in him about her affair with David. She expressed concerns that her relationship was in danger because of David's wife, whom she viewed as a barrier to their happiness. Rebecca mentioned that she had tried to create tension between David and his wife by sending anonymous texts about his alleged infidelities, but those efforts had failed. Their marriage remained intact, and David's wife had forgiven him. David and Laverne was planning to relocate, which meant Rebecca risked losing David for good. She was deeply infatuated with him, and a phone call from David the day before the murder indicated that his feelings for her were strong as well. Rebecca viewed her former best friend Laverne as the rival she needed to confront, and she was determined to act to prevent David from moving away. In this context, she approached her cousin and asked if he knew any acquaintances with criminal backgrounds who could eliminate her rival for a significant payment and make it look like an accident to avoid suspicion. However, he refused to get involved in any criminal activity, and she left. Later, when he heard about the tragedy, he realized it might have been connected to Rebecca's earlier conversation. The police acted on this new lead. By this time, they had already discovered a love triangle involving the neighbors and suspected that either Laverne's husband or Rebecca could have killed her. They found this theory believable and began to verify the information they had gathered. At this point, Christopher was identified as a second suspect. He had a close relationship with his mother, Rebecca, who financially supported her sons, which gave her significant influence over them. It turned out that Rebecca was also funding Michael's banned substance use, as she had introduced him to illegal substances. However, Michael's relationship with their mother had recently become strained. The police continued to speak with Rebecca's cousin, who identified the murder weapon as a hammer. While it was known that a baseball bat belonged to the victim's son, the source of the hammer had been unclear until now. The cousin confirmed that he had seen the hammer in a toolbox in Rebecca's garage. Following this revelation, a wealth of incriminating evidence against the mastermind of the murder began to emerge. The detectives obtained a search warrant for Rebecca's SUV and discovered small bloodstains on the floor. Lab tests confirmed that the blood belonged to the victim. The investigators were now convinced that Rebecca was the mastermind behind the murder, with her son Christopher as the actual perpetrator. The final step was to piece together all the evidence and charge both individuals involved in the crime. Detectives brought Rebecca Sears back to the police station for further questioning. Unexpectedly, she confessed that she genuinely wanted Laverne dead because of her affection for Laverne's husband, David. She opened up about her affair with David and admitted that she had been sending messages to her former best friend, urging her to leave her marriage. Rebecca believed that by betraying Laverne, she could eliminate the only obstacle standing in the way of her happiness. However, Laverne was not willing to part ways, and Rebecca blamed her for the escalating situation. Rebecca claimed she never asked her son, Christopher, to kill Laverne. However, Christopher cared deeply for his mother, empathizing with her emotional struggles and her secret love. They had a close relationship, often discussing their feelings freely. Rebecca did not hide her pain from Christopher about not being able to be with David, and in a misguided attempt to help his mother, Christopher decided to eliminate David's wife for her sake. Christopher wanted to make his mother happy, and in return, she supported him with medications and even bought him a car. According to Rebecca's testimony, Christopher left home early in the morning and went to Laverne's house, where he confronted her. He broke the glass on the back door to enter while she was away. As she was dropping her son off at school, Christopher brought a hammer, waited for Laverne to return, and then attacked her. He initially used the baseball bat to hit her, but switched to using hammer for greater efficiency while she was lying on the ground. After the attack, Christopher called his mother to pick him up, and she arrived at the scene quickly. Rebecca noted that when he got into her car, he was covered in blood and claimed that the issue had been resolved. She was shocked and upset by what he had done, but instead of going to the police, she chose to help him. Christopher changed his clothes and disposed of the bloody ones. Later, Michael called to say that their home had been robbed. It turned out that Christopher had faked a burglary to make it seem like he was innocent. Additionally, Rebecca fabricated a story about an attack near her office, where she encourages Christopher to attack her leg. Rebecca made the story appear realistic to confuse the police, suggesting that someone was stalking their family. Ultimately, she claimed to be a victim in this situation and insisted that Christopher acted on his own when he killed Laverne. The police were appalled by the cynicism and cowardice displayed by Rebecca, who exploited her own son for her gain. The lead investigator, with 32 years of experience, had never witnessed such cruelty. On April 22, 2009, Rebecca and her son Christopher were arrested and charged with armed robbery and murder, both pleading not guilty. Remarkably, Rebecca testified against her son in court, claiming she knew the location of Christopher's bloody clothes. She intended to offer this information in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence, as both she and her son were facing the death penalty in Georgia due to the severity of the crime. A plea deal was reached, and Rebecca indicated that the evidence was hidden in her mother's attic, which was later confirmed. Upon finding the clothes, investigators discovered drops of blood on them that belonged to the victim, Laverne. The townspeople were shocked to discover Rebecca's true character. Not only did she exploit her son for her own selfish purposes, but she also attempted to frame him to escape the death penalty. During the trial, more troubling information emerged. The owner of the clinic where Rebecca worked as a manager alleged that large amounts of money had been disappearing from the accounts since Rebecca started her job. An internal investigation confirmed that Rebecca had embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars. While her son was wrongfully suspected, it was Rebecca who had been stealing from the company all along. Michael's accusation of theft was a result of his mother's actions, as she had once tried to implicate him. Thankfully, the situation was resolved, and he was not charged in the criminal case. In the murder case, both defendants accepted a plea deal to receive lighter sentences and avoid the death penalty. In May 2012, Rebecca Sears pleaded guilty to murder, armed robbery, and burglary. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for murder, another life sentence for armed robbery, and an additional 20 years for burglary. The court ordered that these sentences be served consecutively, meaning she will never be released. She is currently in Lee Arundel State Prison, Georgia. In the same month, Christopher, who also pleaded guilty, received a life sentence without parole for murder, another life sentence for armed robbery, and 20 years for burglary. Like his mother, Christopher Bowers will remain incarcerated indefinitely. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alexandra Kogut. Alexandra Kogut, 18, was a freshman at the State University of New York at Brockport. She was outgoing and fun-loving. Alexandra had been in a relationship with her boyfriend, Clayton Whitmore, for about 2 years. The couple had met in high school in New Hartford, New York, where they began dating. Despite attending different schools after graduation, they had maintained a close relationship. Although their schools were 3 hours apart, they kept in touch through phone calls, social media messages, and frequent visits. Clayton was a great guy who played hockey at Utica College in New York while studying to become an accountant. He was a skilled athlete and a promising hockey player, and many believed he had a bright future ahead of him. Alexandra's family and friends liked Clayton and considered him a promising young man. They hoped that their relationship would develop into something serious over time. In high school, Alexandra had participated in track and field as well as swimming. She also represented her university in competitions. On Friday, September 28, 2012, Alexandra was excited because her boyfriend, Clayton, was coming to visit her for the weekend. They hadn't seen each other in a long time, and Alexandra missed him. Around 3 p.m., she asked her friend and neighbor if she could borrow some clothes. The two often shared outfits, and her friend agreed. Together, they picked out a nice dress. After trying on dresses, Alexandra went to a swim team meeting. She was running late, so Clayton, who had arrived earlier, had to wait for her. Alexandra called him to let him know she would be late. When Alexandra returned from the swim team meeting, she met Clayton, and together they went to visit a friend of his for dinner. They didn't return to campus until after midnight. Alexandra had assured her mother that she would call or text when she got back to avoid causing concern, but she didn't. This was unusual because Alexandra was always reliable in such matters. Her mother became increasingly worried, sensing that something was wrong. At 2:42 a.m., her mother decided to contact university security and requested a welfare check on her daughter. University security responded quickly and went to Alexandra's dormitory to check. They knocked on the door, which was unlocked, and entered the room. Inside, they found a horrific scene. The dormitory room, which Alexandra and her roommate shared, was covered in blood. In the middle of the room lay a young girl, face down and dead. The victim had multiple injuries, and it was immediately clear that this was not an accident but a brutal murder. Alarmed, they quickly called the police to report the incident. When the police arrived, they found a photo of Alexandra and Clayton together, and they recognized Clayton. That night, the police saw him walking down the street with a girl. He was holding an open can of beer, which attracted the attention of a patrol officer. Clayton was ticketed for the open can of beer but remained calm and cooperative. He then threw the can away and crossed the street, disappearing from sight. As the investigation progressed, it was revealed that Alexandra and her boyfriend, Clayton, had gone to her dorm room together. It was later discovered that Clayton had planned to flee to Canada after the incident. Police began interviewing dorm residents to identify witnesses and gather more evidence. However, most students were not in their rooms at the time. Many had gone home for the weekend, while others were partying or visiting friends. Some residents reported hearing screams and sounds of fighting in the distance but paid little attention, as such noises were common. At around 3 a.m., Clayton's father called 911 and informed the police that his son had confessed to the murder. He explained that Clayton had called him, sounding very agitated, and admitted to doing something terrible. However, Clayton's father had no further details to provide and suggested that the police contact Clayton directly. He also mentioned that he did not know his son's exact location. Police attempted to contact Clayton and trace his phone but were unsuccessful. When they called Clayton's father back, he mentioned that Clayton's girlfriend was in Brockport and that Clayton might still be with her. At this point, police determined that Clayton was still near the crime scene. A patrol car was dispatched to the scene approximately 45 minutes after Clayton's father's initial call. Shortly thereafter, Clayton himself called 911, stating that he wanted to surrender because he had committed a terrible crime. Police located and arrested Clayton Whitmore at approximately 4 a.m. at a rest stop on the New York State Thruway. At this point, police confirmed that the murdered woman was Alexandra Kogut. They discovered that she had used her key card to enter the dormitory building just before she was killed. At the police station, Clayton was questioned to determine what had happened that night and why Alexandra had been killed. Clayton insisted that his relationship with Alexandra had been normal and respectful. However, he said things had taken a turn for the worse on the evening of the incident. According to him, Alexandra had yelled at him in public for no apparent reason. Although she was sweet and cheerful with others, he felt that she had disrespected him. Clayton believed that her behavior was unreasonable and unacceptable. Clayton admitted that he had been holding back resentment toward Alexandra but finally lost control after being fined while walking down the street. He returned to her room feeling tense. Alexandra told him that she wanted to have a serious talk. She revealed that she suspected Clayton of cheating because, some time ago, a photo of an unfamiliar girl had appeared on his phone. When he failed to provide a clear explanation, Alexandra began provoking him by shouting and acting disrespectfully and aggressively. She then began to push him. Finally, Clayton could not take the pressure anymore. In a fit of rage, he attacked Alexandra, throwing her against the wall. He then began hitting her and was unable to stop. He only realized the severity of his actions when he saw Alexandra lying unconscious on the floor, showing no signs of life. Clayton admitted that, during the attack, he had not thought to stop or try to help her. He told police he had been angry and claimed that it was not intentional and that he had no plan or desire to harm her. Clayton initially fled the scene of the crime. After realizing the severity of his actions, he called his father and confessed. His father urged him to surrender to the police, which he eventually did. Although he expressed remorse, Clayton avoided confirming whether a weapon had been used in the murder. He later revealed more details, stating that after punching Alexandra several times, he noticed her breathing had become labored, and she was making wheezing sounds. In response, he took a curling iron and struck her on the head until the noises stopped. Clayton claimed he was fully conscious at the time. Alexandra's autopsy supported his claim, confirming blunt force trauma to the head as the cause of death. Police found blood on the curling iron, along with other evidence indicating that Alexandra's head injury had also been caused by hitting the wall. Clayton was charged with murder and held without bail pending trial. However, he later recanted his confession and denied his guilt. The investigation continued for a long time as police interviewed people who had been involved with Clayton. It was highly likely that he had intentionally harmed Alexandra. Their suspicions were reinforced by the testimony of Clayton's ex-girlfriend, who revealed that she had been subjected to constant violence from him. She decided to end their relationship after he tried to strangle her during an argument. At one point, it seemed as though he might actually kill her, but he ultimately held back. Out of fear, she fled to another city to escape him. Several of Clayton's friends also confirmed his aggressive and erratic behavior. They described him as short-tempered and hostile. One friend recalled an incident at a bar where Clayton wielded a knife and threatened a group of strangers. By the spring of 2014, the case went to trial. The prosecution presented a recording of Clayton confessing to the murder, along with various pieces of physical evidence collected by forensic experts. His fingerprints and DNA were found at the crime scene. The defense acknowledged that Clayton had committed the murder but argued that it was unintentional. Their goal was to secure a reduced sentence. Clayton's attorneys made it clear to the jury and the court that Clayton had been extremely distressed that evening due to being insulted by Alexandra, being fined by the police, and being pressured by Alexandra during a conversation about his betrayal. They argued that these factors had caused Clayton to become emotionally unstable. They claimed that he had lost control and directed his anger at Alexandra. The lawyers stressed that Alexandra had provoked Clayton and that the murder should be considered to have occurred in a state of emotional distress. Clayton blamed his aggressive and emotionally unstable behavior on his father. He explained that his aggression stemmed from years of abuse at the hands of his father, who had treated him and other family members cruelly. According to Clayton, he had suffered years of pressure, moral degradation, and physical abuse from his father. Clayton recounted incidents such as his father beating his brother with a baseball bat, breaking his sister's nose, and kicking his mother. Once, when his father found the children's fingerprints in the car, he tried to force the children to eat the TV remote. Clayton expressed remorse for not being able to resist his father's abusive influence, admitting that he had become a mirror image of his father, whom he despised. Clayton admitted that this led him to humiliate and abuse his girlfriend, act aggressively, and harbor hatred for the world. He apologized to Alexandra's family, expressing genuine remorse for his inability to change his behavior. The prosecution pointed out that there were almost no photographs of Clayton smiling. He appeared cold and distant in all of them. Was this behavior part of his nature? While prosecutors did not dispute Clayton's allegations of abuse by his father, they argued that this did not excuse his actions. The trial lasted about 3 weeks, during which dozens of witnesses testified. The jury deliberated and eventually returned a verdict, finding Clayton Whitmore guilty. He was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Clayton showed no emotion throughout the trial, but after the verdict was announced, he broke down and cried. Notably, Alexandra's family was shocked to learn about the alleged abuse she endured during the relationship. They were unaware of any problems between Alexandra and Clayton, as she had never mentioned any cruelty or aggression toward her. However, when police examined Alexandra's phone, they uncovered at least 30 threatening voice messages from Clayton. It is believed there may have been more, but these recordings were not thoroughly analyzed. Police dismissed this evidence, citing the need for voice analysis, which could have further delayed the case. As a result, none of these threats were presented in court. This evidence could have led to the case being reclassified as first-degree murder, which carries a harsher sentence than manslaughter. About an hour before Alexandra was fatally beaten, she posted a final message on her social media page. It is unclear what was on her mind at the time, but she may have sensed impending danger. Following Alexandra's tragic death, her relatives established a charity to support women who have endured domestic violence, encouraging them to report their experiences and raising public awareness of the issue. Supporters of the charity identify themselves by painting their pinkies purple, a tribute to Alexandra's favorite color. On the night of February 1, 1986, two young women, Jennifer Dewey and Michelle Xavier, disappeared while driving home from Fremont, California. They had been best friends since high school, growing up together, working together, and sharing every moment of their 20s. Just hours after leaving a party, they were found dead, naked, on the side of a remote Mill Creek road. Their bodies were cold, their clothes were torn, and a pink jacket was the only significant clue left at the scene. The deaths of the two women shocked the Fremont community. In a place that had been peaceful, where violence had previously seemed like a regular on the evening news. Family, friends, and the entire city were in shock as two well-liked people became victims of a brutal crime. More than 3 decades later, the case went cold, until a DNA test revealed a name, David Misch, a serial killer who terrorized California in the 1,980 seconds. What police discovered next not only rekindled a forgotten double murder case, but also opened up a chain of chilling truths about a predator who had been hiding in plain sight for years. Jennifer Dewey and Michelle Xavier met in high school and quickly became best friends. They graduated in 1984 and enrolled in the same college. Although a year apart in age, they were inseparable. During college, they both lived with their parents, had boyfriends, and met regularly. Even though they have boyfriends, these two friends still spend most of their free time together. Jennifer was born on December 30, 1965, and was one of 6 children. By age 20, she worked in the cosmetics department of a store in Fremont, California, a city of about 200,000 people. Her best friend, Michelle Xavier, was born on June 14, 1966, and had only one younger brother. When she was 19, Michelle worked at a department store. In charge of the children's clothing section, people often remarked on how alike they looked, frequently mistaking them for sisters. On Saturday, February 1, 1986, Jennifer and Michelle went to a party with their boyfriends in a nearby suburb. Bored, the girls left around 8 p.m. to head back to Fremont. While their boyfriends stayed behind, they planned to drive about 20 minutes and continue their evening in the city rather than go straight home. They stopped at a friend's house, ordered pizza, watched a movie, and hung out. Later, driving Jennifer's convertible, they spotted their boyfriends in a supermarket parking lot. They pulled in, chatted for a while, and then parted ways. Jennifer mentioned she wanted to grab pizza before going home. She and Michelle left the parking lot at about 2:23 a.m. That was the last time they were seen alive, around 12:30 a.m. On Sunday, February 2, a man riding a motorbike on a narrow road called Mill Creek in the suburbs spotted a suspicious object. When he returned to check, he discovered the nude bodies of two young women. Terrified, he called the police. The only clothing found nearby was a pink coat. When the police arrived, they found that the killer had made no attempt to hide the body and likely killed them on the spot, then left, initially without any identifying information. The body was taken for identification and autopsy. Forensics and investigators combed the remote road for evidence. That night, Jennifer's mother had expected her home by midnight. She left the porch light on and went to bed, assuming late nights were not unusual for her adult daughter. By 9 o'clock she realized Jennifer still hadn't returned. Thinking Jennifer might have spent the night with Michelle, she called Michelle's home, only to learn Michelle hadn't come home either. Both families initially assumed the girls were with their boyfriends. The parents remained relatively calm until 1 o'clock p.m. when Jennifer's employer called to ask why she'd missed her shift, something she had never done. Alarmed, Jennifer's mother contacted Michelle's family again. They, too, had received calls about Michelle missing work. Together, the families filed missing persons reports. Police, aware of the two unidentified bodies, I suspected a connection. Their suspicions grew when Jennifer's parents said she'd been wearing a pink coat, matching the one found at the scene. Later that day, February 2, officers located Jennifer's convertible parked behind a gas station near the shopping center where she worked. The car had no keys or personal items that could help identify the victims, but the license plate confirmed it was Jennifer's vehicle. Police contacted the mall staff, the nearby hotel owner, and the gas station owner to gather information. The gas station owner said a car suddenly appeared behind the building at 11:15 p.m. Two women got out and lingered near it, but he didn't see them leave. Later, an employee said that at 11:20 p.m., when he went out to smoke, he did not see any cars near the gas station. He also personally knew both Jennifer and Michelle. Witnesses suggested the abduction took no more than 5 minutes. There was a bar nearby, but Jennifer and Michelle, being under 21, could not have gone inside. Nevertheless, the kidnapper may have appeared at the bar, so the staff and the owner were also questioned, but no one noticed anything unusual. On February 5, 1986, a memorial service was held for Jennifer and Michelle, who seemed inseparable in life and died together. More than 1,000 people attended. They were buried on February 6. That same day, a vote approved a $5,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of whoever was responsible for Jennifer and Michelle's deaths. Beginning February 7, more details about the attack were released. Previously, police had revealed almost nothing. Authorities then disclosed that one victim had been fatally slashed with a bladed weapon and the other had been shot. On February 13, a photo was released, taken just hours before the murder, showing Jennifer and Michelle together for the last time. Public interest remained high. After the release of information and photographs, about 100 people came forward, but unfortunately all provided false or worthless leads. By then, the city council had increased the reward to $6,000. In March, Michelle's cousin organized a fundraiser to expand the reward, including a benefit concert. By April, the fund had reached $35,000. A bulletin with pictures of Jennifer and Michelle was released, compiling all the official information released by the authorities. Meanwhile, detectives were still actively investigating and noted several similar cases in the area in 1983 to 1984. but found no direct connection with the deaths of two young girls, Jennifer and Michelle. Many people suspect this is a serial killer. Those fears grew when another victim, 20 years old Dana Lee, was found in early March 1987. She had last been seen on December 29, 1986, at a gas station near where Jennifer's car had been found. Investigators eventually caught Dana's killer, but could not connect him to the double murder of Michelle and Jennifer. Leads dried up, and suspects with solid alibis were eliminated. The case stalled. For years, no new information emerged. Similar cases had occurred in the area before the 1,990 seconds, but after investigation, no connection to Jennifer and Michelle's case could be found. However, police periodically reviewed and re-examined the case. New forensic techniques brought renewed hope. In 2001, investigators found skin cells under Jennifer's fingernails. They developed a DNA profile of the attacker and uploaded it to a law enforcement database, but it produced no matches. In 2016, the Fremont Police Department created a cold case unit that reopened Jennifer and Michelle's case. Detectives retested old DNA evidence using updated databases and found a match to David Misch, whose DNA had been uploaded in 2003. DNA from under a victim's fingernails matched David's DNA. That evidence was collected in 2001, 2 years before his profile entered the database. David had been convicted of murder in 1989 and was serving a life sentence in the early 2000s. Notably, when his DNA was first compared to evidence from Jennifer and Michelle's case in 2003, it already showed a match. Detectives interviewed David. He said he tried to help Jennifer and Michelle. He said he was at a gas station when he saw two men dragging Jennifer behind a building. He rushed over, realized there were two victims, and tried to intervene. According to him, the men forced both girls into a car and fled. He said he was hit in the face and disoriented, and Jennifer may have scratched him while trying to escape, which could explain the DNA under her fingernails. A week later, detectives asked David to tell the story again. David refused, so the account was never publicly released. However, the interview is still important because he admits to being with Jennifer and Michelle during their kidnapping. He was not questioned again for 14 years. In August 2017, the case unit found a DNA match for David in the database. They also interviewed Jennifer and Michelle's family again. On September 8, 2017, they met with David, who repeated his 2003 story. On March 2, 2018, prosecutors charged David with 2 counts of first-degree murder and kidnapping. He remained in county custody. The case subsequently faced numerous delays, prison transfers, administrative issues, and additional charges, including the 1988 kidnapping. As a result, David did not appear in court until October 21, 2024. The trial lasted 6 weeks and revealed disturbing details previously kept from the public. Prosecutors stated that Michelle was attacked with a knife and died from a deep throat wound that caused her to bleed out within minutes. Jennifer was shot 3 times in the back, suggesting she tried to flee. Letters and numbers found on Michelle's palm were identified as a license plate. A reinvestigation showed it matched a motorcycle registered to David Misch in the 1,980 seconds. Detectives in the original investigation did not recognize the markings and likely searched for a car owner instead of a motorcyclist. Blood was found in Michelle's convertible. Many previously undisclosed details related to Jennifer and Michelle's clothes and belongings. They were not lost, but were found near the bodies. T-shirts, sweatshirts, pants, and underwear were scattered, some hanging from tree branches and from barbed wire along the roadside fence. The bodies were originally discovered by a county judge and his wife as they drove by. The judge has since passed away, but his 90-year-old wife testified at the trial, describing a horrific scene with blood and torn clothing everywhere, as if something brutal had taken place. David Misch testified in his own defense, Despite his lawyer's warnings, he then changed his story dramatically. He claimed that he was a banned substance dealer and said that Jennifer and Michelle approached him on the night of the kidnapping. He first met Jennifer at a shopping mall shortly before the murder and gave her a number to buy a banned substance. According to him, she repeatedly called to purchase marijuana for herself, her friend, and her boyfriend. David said they later met at a gas station at night, talked for a few minutes, and shared a cigarette. He argued that this is how his DNA ended up under Jennifer's fingernails. After selling the banned substance, he said that he drove away and didn't know what happened next. This major shift in his account only deepened suspicion. He showed no remorse and even hummed a tune in court. On December 19, 2024, David refused to attend the sentencing hearing. He was convicted and faces life imprisonment. The maximum sentence is expected to be handed down on January 21, 2025. However, the case does not end there. Advances in forensic analysis link David to several other violent crimes previously left unsolved. At 3:00 p.m. on December 7, 1989, Margaret Ball, 36, was found dead on the living room floor. She lived with her 11-year-old daughter, who discovered her mother's death. Margaret had been severely beaten and stabbed multiple times in the chest and abdomen. David was her neighbor. They had been on friendly terms, and he sometimes ran errands for her for money. Over time, he developed a romantic interest, which he rejected. After she refused, he became aggressive and threatening, and she began avoiding him. After the murder, Margaret's 1981 Mazda, along with her wallet, food stamps, and $85, were missing. A crucial clue. The next morning, police arrested David after spotting him driving a car with Margaret's license plate. His father testified that on the day Margaret was found dead, he came home and confessed, saying that he had attacked her while under the influence of a banned substance, robbed her, and stolen her car. At the trial, David stated that initially Margaret agreed to be intimate with him, but later changed her mind, which led him to hit her. He said she pulled a knife. A struggle ensued, and he stabbed her in a rage. The trial ended in 1990, and David was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But that was only part of his string of crimes. While the Jennifer and Michelle cases were still pending, another complaint arose. David was suspected of being involved in the kidnapping of 9-year-old Michaela Garrick, a case that had made headlines. Her disappearance drew national attention, with extensive media coverage. In September 2020, athlete Joe Montana publicly suggested David Mish might also have been involved in the murder of his wife, who was found dead in their Malibu home. An event also dated to 1988, 3 months after Michaela's abduction. On December 21, 2020, David was indicted for kidnapping Michaela after investigators found partial fingerprints on the scooter Michaela was riding. He is believed to have lived nearby at the time, and evidence matched his fingerprints. Michaela Garrick was born on January 24, 1979, the middle of 3 children. Her family moved to Hayward in 1987. Soon after, Michaela knocked on a neighbor's door, hoping to make a new friend. That's how she met Katrina. They became best friends, even dressing alike and pretending to be twins. Their story parallels that of Jennifer and Michelle, who were also close friends and later became victims of David. On November 19, 1988, Michaela spent the day with Katrina. They went to a store to buy candy and soda. Riding there on a scooter, Michaela had borrowed from her brother. After shopping, they started home. After a few hundred meters, they remembered that they had left their scooter in the parking lot. So they turned back. It wasn't where they had left it. After looking around, they found it lying on the ground in a more secluded part of the lot. As Michaela bent down to pick it up, a man who appeared to be homeless suddenly grabbed her. Katrina described him as unkempt and dirty, fair-skinned, with long, untrimmed hair. She saw him drag Michaela into a car and drive away. She ran into the store for help, and an employee called the police. The only immediate lead was her description of the abductor. Katrina provided information and led police to the tire tracks where the car had been parked. She described the car but couldn't see the license plate, limiting the usefulness of the tip. The family mobilized immediately. In the first week alone, about 40,000 flyers were distributed. Despite this, the case went cold for years. Police received no solid leads. Even after press conferences, Hayward officers interviewed numerous men with histories of kidnappings and violent offenses, but none confessed. Several suspects were identified, yet investigations showed they could not have committed the crime. For decades, Michaela's family hoped she was alive. Though the odds were slim, they resisted believing the worst. When Michaela's mother was told a primary suspect had been identified, she declined to meet him. She thanked the investigators and said she had long accepted her daughter's death, only hoping to know where she was. Tragically, Michaela's mother died in 2022 without that answer. At the time, David was still awaiting trial for Michaela's kidnapping. David's criminal history began at age 16. In 1977, he broke into a neighbor's house and attacked the housekeeper, threatening her with a knife and attempting to strangle her. She managed to fight him off and escape. He was arrested, adjudicated as a juvenile, served a short sentence, and was released on parole. In 1979, he broke into another neighbor's home and threatened a mother and her 2 children. She talked him down, and he left without harming them. After his arrest, he was committed to a psychiatric hospital. In September 1981, he was released after experts deemed him no longer a threat. The assessment proved wrong. In June 1982, he attacked and beat an exchange student. While the girl was unconscious, he tried to drag her into the car, but a passerby intervened and he fled. Thanks to the witness's account, David was arrested and convicted. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. By late 1985, he was released. He got a job and appeared to be attempting a normal life. He started a relationship, and his girlfriend became pregnant. On February 1, 1986, he murdered Jennifer and Michelle. In November 1987, his girlfriend gave birth, but the baby died at 3 months old. The death was ruled natural causes. In February 1988, David was imprisoned for theft and released a few months later. In November 1988, he kidnapped Michaela. In April 1989, he was again incarcerated for theft. On December 7, 1989, he murdered Margaret Ball. Michaela Garrick's kidnapping trial began in January 2023. Her friend Katrina testified as a witness. As soon as Katrina saw David, the man who kidnapped her best friend Michaela, she immediately recognized him and has been tormented by self-blame ever since. For 10 years after Michaela's disappearance, Katrina continued to buy her birthday presents. David's lawyer argued there was no proof Michaela had died and suggested she might have run away. However, given Katrina's eyewitness account of the abduction, the runaway theory was not considered credible. David has never admitted guilt, shown remorse, or provided any details about what happened to Michaela. The trial remains ongoing, and Michaela's body has not been found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Dustin Duthie. Dustin Duthie grew up in a large family, with both biological and half-siblings from his mother's and stepfather's previous marriages. His mother, Shawn Boshuk, separated from his biological father when Dustin was 3 years old. Despite this, his stepfather, Alan Penny Legion, became a loving and supportive father figure. Dustin was especially close to his younger half-brother Adam. From a young age, Dustin was recognized as being very intelligent, and his family had high expectations for his future. They believed he would achieve great things. However, as Dustin grew older, he often argued and fought with his relatives, and these conflicts frequently escalated from verbal disagreements to physical altercations. Although his family tried to help him manage his anger, it became clear that Dustin struggled to control his emotions. His arguments became increasingly violent, and he began throwing objects at others as a way to release his frustration. Over time, his parents began to tolerate his behavior and often gave in to his demands to avoid further conflict. This approach allowed Dustin to manipulate his family, especially his mother, Shawn, who frequently gave in to him. His manipulative and violent tendencies continued throughout his teenage years. Dustin's behavior eventually led to legal trouble. At the age of 16, he was arrested for the first time after breaking into his school with friends. Together, they vandalized the vice principal's office, smashed a vending machine with a stolen golf club, and stole various items. Despite this incident, Dustin showed no signs of changing his behavior. As Dustin grew older, he became a burden to his family, causing pain and frustration for his parents. His rude and aggressive behavior did not improve with age. In an attempt to control his anger, Dustin took boxing classes, but this effort proved unsuccessful. Adam experienced this firsthand during a training session when Dustin's aggression led to illegal strikes that violated the rules of boxing. Fortunately, the coach intervened before Dustin could harm his younger brother. That day, Adam truly understood how dangerous his brother was. The only person who could stand up to Dustin was their stepfather, Alan, which caused tension between the two. During his teenage years, Dustin had many friends and even a few girlfriends. As both Adam and Dustin entered adulthood, they actively pursued relationships. During this time, Adam met and fell in love with a girl named Taylor Toller. However, tensions arose when Adam noticed Taylor growing closer to Dustin, leading to a minor conflict between the two brothers. Adam found out that Taylor and Dustin were dating. Although he felt sad about it, he chose to accept and support their relationship. When Taylor began dating Dustin, she was 20 years old. Taylor, the only daughter in her family, had grown up happily, surrounded by loved ones and many friends. After graduating from high school, Taylor's gentle and kind nature led her to feel drawn to working with children. In contrast, Dustin was very different from Taylor. He often communicated in a rough and abrasive manner, even with her. Their relationship was frequently tense and filled with conflict. Taylor and Dustin's friends noticed that the couple constantly argued. Despite this, Taylor did not leave Dustin. Perhaps she believed he would eventually change or that she could help him improve. Their complicated relationship dragged on for years, but Dustin's inability to control his anger only made things worse. The situation became even more strained due to frequent arguments with Dustin's family. These conflicts escalated to the point where Dustin physically assaulted his younger brother, Adam, and his stepfather, Alan. Boxing played a significant role in shaping Dustin's behavior. Whenever he felt angry, frustrated, or dissatisfied, he would hit the gym and train harder. It was during this time that Dustin began using steroids. Steroids are widely known to cause side effects such as anger, irritability, and aggressive behavior. Dustin's friends and family repeatedly urged him to stop using the drugs and even suggested that he seek professional help, but he ignored their advice. In the weeks and months that followed, his anger issues worsened. At one point, Dustin attempted to attack his stepfather, Alan, with a metal bar. At family dinners, threats and yelling became commonplace. One evening, however, Dustin's behavior became so unbearable that he was asked to leave. He stood up, walked toward the door, but before leaving, he turned back to his family and said, "You will get what you deserve," before storming out. The family had grown accustomed to Dustin's behavior. These behaviors had become a regular part of their lives, At the time, no one truly believed he would act on any of his threats. However, years of unchecked behavior and lack of intervention were about to take their toll. Everything would come to a head in the summer of 2018. On the morning of Tuesday, July 31, 2018, Adam began his day as usual with a cup of coffee. While sipping his coffee, he realized he hadn't heard from his brother Dustin or the rest of the family in days. Feeling concerned, Adam tried calling Dustin, but his calls went straight to voicemail. He continued trying to reach his brother, but all attempts were unsuccessful. Before he could dwell on it further, Adam received a surprise call from the police. They asked to meet him at his home to discuss an urgent matter. When Adam pressed for details, the officer explained that it was not something they could discuss over the phone. When the police arrived, they shared news that would change Adam's life forever. They informed him about a phone call Dustin had made to the police. During the call, Dustin confessed to killing his girlfriend a week earlier, as well as his stepfather and mother. According to the police, Dustin had been sitting downstairs with a knife and a bottle of whiskey, unable to bring himself to go upstairs and face what he had done. The police rushed to Taylor's home in Elmwood Park, where they discovered her body. Dustin was arrested shortly after making the call and did not resist arrest. Forensic evidence and Dustin's confession revealed that Taylor had been killed 5 days before Dustin murdered his parents. Taylor's body was found in her bed. According to Dustin, the two had argued and fought throughout the night. At around 3 a.m., he strangled her. However, the actual cause of death was determined to be a deep cut to her throat. After her death, Dustin pulled the covers up to her chin. 2 hours later, at around 5 a.m., Dustin left Taylor's apartment and returned to his parents' house, trying to suppress the memory of what he had done. Incredibly, he attempted to act as if nothing had happened for the next few days. The situation changed when Taylor's parents called Dustin's parents. Taylor had been the one in regular contact with her family, so her sudden silence raised concerns. The call alarmed Dustin's parents, who had known Taylor for over 5 years. During this time, Dustin's parents repeatedly tried to get him to talk, suspecting that he might know something about Taylor's disappearance. Despite their persistence, Dustin insisted that he knew nothing. Dustin claimed that he had spoken to Taylor 3 days before her disappearance, but maintained that he had no idea what might have happened to her. However, his parents seemed to believe he was hiding something, and their constant questioning made Dustin realize that the truth would soon come out. Feeling desperate, he concluded that the only way to keep Taylor's disappearance a secret was to make his parents disappear as well. While contemplating how to carry out his plan, Dustin was in the kitchen with his mother, who was sitting at the table sorting some papers. At that moment, he once again lost control of his actions. According to the police report, Dustin's mother, Shawn, had been attacked with a knife, and her body was dragged across the kitchen floor in an attempt to hide it. His stepfather, Alan, was also murdered by Dustin, suffering multiple stab wounds. Both bodies were placed under a plastic tarp, and the surrounding area was hastily cleaned. During the investigation, police discovered a pile of hair in the bathroom. They later determined that Dustin had shaved his head to alter his appearance, possibly in an attempt to escape and hide. However, he ultimately failed to follow through with this plan. After killing his parents, Dustin drove to Taylor's apartment, but was unable to get inside because he had lost the remote control key. Frustrated, he drank whiskey, smoked cigarettes, and pondered his next move. With nowhere to go, no way to dispose of the body, and no plan to cover his tracks, Dustin decided to call 911. Initially, he was incoherent, appearing confused and uncertain about his actions. The experienced police officers kept him talking instead of ending the call, encouraging him to share more details. Dustin eventually confessed to killing his parents earlier that day. The police redirected the conversation, asking about his condition, whether he had been drinking, and whether he had a weapon. They stayed on the line, urging him to surrender peacefully and without resistance. Meanwhile, officers were dispatched to arrest him. Although the investigation appeared straightforward, it took police more than 2 years to gather and analyze all the evidence needed to present the case in court. It was determined that Taylor had been killed in the early morning hours of July 26, 2018. Surveillance camera footage showed Dustin and Taylor entering and leaving the apartment at different times, sometimes holding hands. The evening before the murder, Taylor was seen returning to the apartment alone, visibly upset and crying. The couple was later seen having an emotional discussion. At 5:15 a.m., Dustin was seen leaving the apartment alone, carrying a large box. He then removed the box and a black bag from his car. Inside the box is Taylor's towel. After Dustin was arrested, he was taken to a local hospital for observation because he appeared to be mentally unstable. After undergoing evaluations, he was determined to be mentally competent to stand trial. A key piece of evidence was later discovered by Dustin's younger brother in the back seat of Alan's car. It was a letter torn into small pieces, crumpled, and wrapped in duct tape. Experts painstakingly reconstructed the letter, which turned out to be Dustin's confession. In it, he described his thoughts and feelings after killing Taylor, admitting that he had always been curious about what it felt like to kill someone and to feel someone's soul leave their body. How this letter ended up in his stepfather's car remains a mystery, but it played an important role in building Dustin's psychological profile. A psychological evaluation determined that Dustin was suffering from a mental disorder at the time of the crimes. However, the disorder was caused by his use of illegal drugs and steroids, which impaired his ability to understand the nature, consequences, and illegality of his actions. The findings, evidence, and confessions of Dustin built a strong case against him. 3 years after the murders of Taylor Toller, Sean Boschuk, and Alan Penny Legion, Dustin Duthie's trial began. However, just 3 days before the trial, Dustin pleaded guilty to all 3 counts, bringing the case to a close. Dustin Duthie was convicted of second-degree murder for the deaths of his mother, Taylor, and Sean, as well as first-degree murder for the murder of his stepfather, Alan. During the trial, several people testified, including Dustin's grandmother and siblings, who shared the pain of losing their mother and stepfather. Many others present in court spoke in support of Taylor. Taylor's mother emotionally stated that their family had been a close-knit one, and now they live with nightmares and trauma. They will never forgive Dustin for taking their daughter's life. Dustin was also given the opportunity to speak. He said that he would not ask for forgiveness because he knew what he had done was unforgivable. If he could sacrifice his life to bring back those 3 beautiful souls, he would do it. The prosecution emphasized that Dustin killed his mother and stepfather while sober. By law, Dustin was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years. The sentence includes 25 years for the murders of his stepfather, Alan, and his mother, Sean, as well as an additional 10 years for the murder of his girlfriend, Taylor. While the loss is irreparable, the family feels that justice has been served and that Dustin will face the consequences of his actions. The deaths of Sean and Alan have had a profound impact on their children. One of their sons, Adam, has said that the loss of his parents shattered his dream of pursuing a football career. Another son has expressed his grief over Dustin's actions. Sean and Alan were loving, supportive parents who gave Dustin many opportunities to turn his life around and stood by him and their other children. It is a great tragedy that such a betrayal came from their own son. Although Dustin has apologized and could be eligible for parole after 35 years, many believe he should stay behind bars for life. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marty Hill. Marty Hill, 42, lives in a cozy little town called Prairie Village, Kansas, USA. She is energetic, cheerful, and kind. From a young age, she was drawn to fine art, dreaming of becoming an artist or designer. To pursue this dream, she worked hard, completed her studies, and gained the necessary educational background. Eventually, she fulfilled her dream by working in the design studio of a clothing company. At the company, Marty is always highly regarded for his outstanding achievements and reliability. So, when she failed to show up for work on September 8, 2010, without any notice, everyone immediately suspected that something was wrong. No one knew what had happened, and she had not requested any leave. Initially, her colleagues hoped she might just be running late. They tried calling her but received no response and decided to wait a little longer. An important meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and Marty's attendance was deemed essential. Her absence worried everyone since she was always responsible and fully aware of the meeting's importance. She is usually deeply involved with the group and consistently reports any issues, so her silence in this case is unusual. Growing increasingly uneasy, one of her friends tried calling her repeatedly, but the calls went unanswered. Overcome with fear, the friend began to break down in tears, sensing deep in her heart that something terrible might have happened to Marty. A friend decided to find out what had happened to Marty. One of her colleagues offered to visit her house and check on her. He arrived at her quiet residential neighborhood at 11:30 a.m. and knocked on her door, but there was no answer. This seemed odd, especially since her car was parked in the driveway, suggesting she should have been home. He walked around the house but saw nothing unusual, although he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The unsettling silence made him uneasy, so he returned to his car. The colleague returned to the office and discussed the situation with the others. They decided it was necessary to call the police to check on Marty. Because Marty had a 15-year-old daughter who was at school at the time, they agreed not to alarm her until they obtained more information about Marty's whereabouts. Eventually, the police were contacted, and the colleague stayed near Marty's driveway, waiting for the police to arrive. The police arrived at the scene within minutes. When the officer knocked on the door, there was no response, and there were no signs of forced entry. Looking through a window, he noticed a woman's purse sitting on the kitchen table, which indicated that Marty should have been inside. Concerned, the officer decided to check the door, suspecting she might be unwell and in need of help. To his surprise, the door was unlocked. The officer entered the house and searched the first and second floors but found nothing out of the ordinary. He then proceeded to check the basement. Using a flashlight, the officer realized there were no lights in the basement. As he descended to the very bottom, he spotted someone lying in a large pool of blood, curled up in a fetal position. The dim light revealed a gruesome scene. The room was splattered with so much blood that it resembled a torture chamber. At first, the police thought the victim was a man due to the large amount of blood, but upon closer inspection, they couldn't even determine the victim's gender. Based on the scene, they concluded that the person was dead. However, to their horror, the victim suddenly turned around and looked directly at them. The police discovered a severe wound on the victim's throat and observed that her face was so swollen, disfigured it resembled a gruesome, bloody mess. Believing the victim was on the verge of death, an officer leaned in and repeatedly asked, "Who did this?" Despite his efforts, the victim struggled to breathe and was unable to speak. Prior to questioning, the officer had already called for medical assistance. Though still alive, the victim was unable to reveal the identity of her attacker. The victim was rushed to the nearest hospital due to her critical condition, which made identifying her difficult. Her injuries were concentrated on her head and face, including multiple skull fractures, facial fractures, a concussion, and cerebral swelling. The wound was particularly devastating, slicing through muscles and vital blood vessels. Medical experts estimated her chances of survival at no more than 20%. Finally, the victim was identified to be Marty Hill, the owner of the home. Against all odds, the doctors managed to save her life. Attention immediately turned to her teenage daughter, Mackenzie, who was contacted right away. Mackenzie was in complete shock and had no idea what had transpired at their home. Upon hearing of the brutal attack, family members rushed to the hospital to be with Marty. The extent of her suffering was unimaginable, and her injuries were so severe that even her own mother didn't recognize her. Unfortunately, the doctors all gave the same grim prognosis regarding her chances of survival. Her condition was serious, but at least it was somewhat manageable. Family members took turns staying by her bedside every day. The situation was so overwhelming that they felt a mix of anger and helplessness. Her son, Stephen, felt the most anger. Living in Texas at the time, he returned home to be with his mother and offer his support. Stephen was the first person to enter the basement where his mother had been found. After the forensic investigator examined the house, they emerged from the basement and strictly prohibited anyone else from entering due to the gruesome nature of the scene. While the relatives grieved, Stephen cleaned up the blood himself. Detectives investigating the tragedy were baffled, unable to determine who could have committed such an act or why. Marty's family and friends were equally perplexed, as no one could imagine her having an enemy capable of such violence. Investigators searched for clues in her personal life, workplace, and relationships with her children but found nothing unusual. The crime was determined to be unrelated to abuse, as Marty's clothes remained intact, a conclusion later confirmed by the Armed Forces analysis. There was no indication of theft, nothing was missing, and the house showed no signs of forced entry. The circumstances of the crime were shrouded in mystery. Even Marty herself was unable to provide any information about the identity of her attacker. The police interviewed Marty's neighbors, but none of them were able to provide any significant information. The only clue reported was a sighting of a red, broken pickup truck near Marty's house at around 8 a.m., driven by a young, light-skinned, short man. This timing aligned with the approximate time of the attack determined by detectives. The officers followed up by visiting the sewing company where Marty worked to interview her colleagues, hoping to identify someone matching the description of the driver. However, this lead turned into another dead end, as none of her co-workers could offer useful information or suggest who might have been driving the pickup truck. Detectives then shifted their focus to Marty's family. They spoke with Marty's mother, Shirley Roth, who provided a potentially valuable lead. Shirley revealed that her daughter had not been romantically involved with anyone since divorcing her ex-husband 7 years earlier. Despite their divorce, they maintained regular contact because they shared custody of their daughter. Shirley explained that, following the divorce, Marty had dedicated herself entirely to her work and children and had shown no interest in dating. In Shirley's opinion, the only person who seemed like a potential suspect was Marty's ex-husband. This lead warranted further investigation, especially since Marty remained unconscious and unable to provide information herself. Detectives continued to speak with family members to identify Marty's ex-husband. Their children were quick to defend their father. Their daughter, Mackenzie, a high school student, took offense at the suggestion that her father could be a suspect. She asserted that her father could not have done such a thing, describing him as calm, non-confrontational, and someone who maintained a good relationship with his ex-wife and children. Their son, Stephen, also rejected the suspicion, stating that his father was incapable of committing the crime. Despite this, detectives could not dismiss the theory and decided to investigate it thoroughly. The police then visited Marty's ex-husband at his home. He was fully cooperative, invited them inside, and answered their questions openly. He appeared deeply affected by the incident, expressing that he still cared for Marty and was distressed by what had happened. He expressed relief that she had survived and shared that he was praying for her recovery. Although there was nothing initially suspicious, the police still needed to verify his alibi. He told them that, on the morning of the attack, he had taken his daughter to school before going to work. To confirm his statement, the police spoke with his daughter, Mackenzie, who was living with her grandmother, while they worked on verifying the details he had provided. A DNA sample was taken from him, though analysis would require time. For Mackenzie, the prohibition against seeing her father created additional hardship, making this a challenging period for everyone involved. The police also collected DNA samples from under Marty's nails, along with hair follicles found on her clothing. After comparing this evidence with the ex-husband's DNA, all suspicions about him were completely dismissed. His DNA did not match, and his alibi was verified. As a result, the ex-husband was officially cleared from the list of suspects, much to Mackenzie's relief. The family was finally able to reconnect and support one another as they waited for Marty to regain consciousness. Meanwhile, Marty's family tried to piece together what had happened and figure out who might have attacked her. Her mother, Shirley, recalled that not long before the incident, the grandmother's house had been broken into and robbed. This raised fears that the entire family could be targeted by a stalker intent on carrying out violent acts. However, the police had no definite answers, leaving the family engulfed in fear and paranoia. They had no clue who the perpetrator could be and clung to hope that Marty would recover and reveal what had truly happened. The family also recalled that, shortly before the attack, a handyman had visited Marty's house to change the locks. This handyman worked for B&J Construction, a company her mother and grandmother had trusted and hired for years. Coincidentally, he was the only unfamiliar person who had interacted with Marty in recent months. This raised suspicions that the handyman, who often did repair work for the family, might be connected to both the robbery and the assault. The police turned their attention to Brian Pennington, the handyman who had regularly visited Marty's house, her mother's house, and her grandmother's house to handle household repairs and maintenance. At the time, Brian was 26 years old, married, and the father of 2 children. He lived about an hour and a half away in a small town called Leeton, Missouri, with a population of around 500. On September 10, 2010, detectives decided to visit Brian's home. When they arrived, they immediately noticed a broken red pickup truck in the driveway, which matched a description provided by neighbors of a suspicious vehicle. However, the truck did not have license plates, so they were unable to confirm the match. Inside the house, they found Brian, who was cooperative and permitted the officers to enter his kitchen. He answered their questions openly. When asked about the truck, Brian explained that he didn't drive it because it had no license plates. He also mentioned that his last visit to Marty's house had been 3 to 4 days before the attack, during which he had checked the basement equipment. Brian didn't contact the police after seeing on the news that Marty had been attacked. He explained that he didn't know anything and couldn't provide any useful information about the case. Brian wasn't very familiar with Marty. Their interactions had been limited to working together on repairing her house. Although he considered her a respectable woman, that was all he could share with the authorities. However, detectives began to question his account. Their suspicions were triggered by the fresh scratches on his face, which might have been caused during a confrontation with Marty. When asked about these marks, he explained that they were caused by a dog that had scratched him while he was playing in the yard the day before the detectives came to visit. He acted fearful when accused of being involved in the crime, insisting that he was incapable of such an act. Brian provided an alibi, prompting investigators to verify his story. When detectives spoke to Brian's wife, Jessica, they noticed her odd behavior from the outset. She appeared hesitant, seemed afraid to disclose the truth, dodged direct questions, and mentioned there had been tension in their relationship lately. Jessica stated that her husband had been at home that morning, sleeping in another room, and added that the last time he had worked at Marty's house was about a month earlier. She also corroborated Brian's claim that the scratches on his face were caused by a dog. However, her demeanor suggested she was not being truthful. Detectives doubted her account, and she was taken to the station for further questioning. Authorities suspected Jessica might either be an accomplice to the crime or trying to shield the killer. Before leaving Brian's house, the police asked him whether they would find anything suspicious if they searched the property. Brian confidently stated that they wouldn't find anything and even agreed to let them look around. However, in the laundry basket, at the very bottom, they discovered a pair of jeans with suspicious stains. Brian explained that the stains weren't blood but merely machine oil left over from working on a pickup truck. He allowed the police to take the jeans for testing and voluntarily provided his DNA samples for comparison. The items were immediately sent to the forensic lab, where tests confirmed the stains were blood, not oil. However, additional time was needed to extract the DNA profile and compare it. While detectives awaited the test results, Marty regained consciousness in the hospital 12 days after the attack. Although she was able to communicate shortly thereafter, her initial days out of unconsciousness were clouded by confusion. During this time, she experienced constant pain and discomfort. It's not surprising that Marty needed to take a large number of medications during her recovery. Her poor health may have stemmed from her reliance on these drugs, in addition to the severe injuries she suffered. Despite the extensive brain damage she endured, her memory remained largely intact. Marty informed the police that Brian Pennington was the one who had attacked her. She described that morning's incident as starting entirely normally. She woke up early, got ready for work, and followed her usual routine. Around 7:30 a.m., she heard a car stop in front of her house but didn't pay it much attention. Soon after, there was a knock at the door. It was Brian, who had worked on her house about a month earlier. Marty found his visit odd from the beginning. It was unplanned and too early in the morning. However, she reassured herself, thinking he might have been working nearby or had forgotten a tool during his last visit. Although she was hesitant to open the door, she ultimately decided to do so. The two had a brief conversation. Brian was polite and friendly, which helped ease her concerns. Brian explained that he had heard Marty was planning to sell her house and wanted to alert her to a problem he had noticed during the previous renovation. He insisted it was important and offered to show her the issue in the basement. Curiosity overcame her, and she agreed to follow him downstairs. She recounted that everything happened very quickly. Initially, they were just walking downstairs, but an unsettling feeling suddenly came over her. Brian grabbed her and pushed her down the stairs, causing her head to hit hard against the concrete floor. Brian violently attacked Marty, choking her until she lost consciousness. Later, Marty explained that her memories of the incident were hazy, as though she were trapped in a fog. She occasionally regained consciousness, only to lose it again shortly afterward. Eventually, a policeman arrived at her home, and she was taken to the hospital. Investigators needed evidence to support Marty's account. Tests were conducted on a pair of jeans found in Brian's laundry basket, which revealed traces of Marty's blood. DNA samples taken from beneath her fingernails also matched his DNA. Law enforcement officers obtained an arrest warrant for Brian and visited his home, but he was not there. The search for him intensified, and soon police in the city discovered a damaged red pickup truck. Jessica was behind the wheel, and Brian was sitting in the passenger seat, visibly disheveled. Authorities charged Brian with attempted murder and robbery, setting bail at $1 million. The news stunned Marty's mother and grandmother, who had been in contact with Brian for years and trusted him as a professional handyman. Brian frequently worked for Marty's family, completing various household repairs. Tragically, it was Marty's mother who had recommended him to her daughter, leaving her with a deep sense of guilt. The family struggled to comprehend this senseless act of aggression. Brian's cruelty seemed inexplicable, and no clear motive emerged. Although he provided no explanation for his actions, experts were left baffled by the sheer brutality of the attack. Doctors were amazed that Marty had survived at all. Brian's violence extended far beyond simply choking Marty into unconsciousness. He threw her down a staircase, causing her to land headfirst on a concrete floor, fracturing her skull. He continued his attack relentlessly, beating her and slashing her throat. Marty struggled to comprehend what she could have done to warrant such a terrible fate. After sustaining severe head injuries, she faced challenges with her balance, although she eventually managed to walk independently. Shortly after emerging from a coma, she developed visual impairments, along with hearing and cognitive difficulties. Her family noticed that Marty seemed like a shadow of her former self, but they remained hopeful for her recovery. At times, she would lapse into long periods of thoughtfulness, which deeply concerned her loved ones, especially her daughter. Doctors refrained from making a definitive prognosis. While acknowledging the challenges Marty faced, they emphasized that her survival against the odds suggested that recovery was possible. After spending about a month in the hospital, Marty was finally discharged. During her recovery period, she became closer to her 16-year-old daughter, Mackenzie, whose birthday occurred while she was still in the hospital. Mackenzie was deeply touched by a card her mother wrote for her, even though the handwriting resembled that of a child. She recognized the long journey ahead and understood her vital role in supporting her mother as she gradually healed. Marty faced significant emotional challenges after the attack, struggling to reconcile how someone she had trusted deeply could turn out to be a vicious criminal capable of unprovoked violence. Seeking solace, she turned to her local church for emotional support. Meanwhile, Marty's family was determined to ensure that Brian faced justice and received a lengthy prison sentence. The prosecutor's office had overwhelming evidence to press charges against him, including physical proof, Marty's detailed account of the attack, scratches on Brian's face, DNA matches, and items stained with blood. The only missing piece was a clear motive. Brian had neither attempted to abuse Marty nor stolen anything from her home. His actions were simply a deliberate and calculated effort to kill her while working in her house. This act of violence was sudden and seemed to lack any apparent provocation. Marty had no prior conflicts with Brian, and relations between him and other women in her family had been peaceful. However, as police investigated Brian's background, they uncovered a troubling history of criminal activity. He had been convicted in 26 separate cases, most of which were related to domestic violence. His ex-wife and former girlfriends had reported him to the police numerous times. Jessica admitted that she had shielded him out of fear of becoming his next target, as his behavior was systematically abusive. Brian frequently threatened her, exhibiting a clear pattern of cruelty. Jessica testified for the prosecution during the trial, stating that Brian was not home on the night of the attack. She explained that he had been away for hours and only returned around noon, after Marty was assaulted. Upon his return, his clothes were covered in blood. When questioned, he claimed it was machine oil but offered no further explanation. Jessica also refuted his claim that the scratches were allegedly caused by the dog, revealing that he had forced her to lie under the threat of being killed. She provided detailed accounts of their married life, describing him as abusive, both physically and emotionally. During the trial, Brian was visibly shocked when Marty appeared alive in court to testify against him. Jessica, his wife, also testified for the prosecution, presenting evidence that contradicted his statements. Moreover, none of Brian's claims were corroborated during the hearings. Jessica submitted cell phone records showing that, at approximately 8 a.m. on the morning of the attack, she had tried to contact Brian. Geolocation data confirmed that he was near Marty's house at the time. As the evidence against Brian continues to build, he has no viable path to acquittal. To avoid a prolonged and traumatic trial, Brian was offered a plea bargain. Although he could have faced up to 40 years in prison, the deal reduced his sentence to 28 years. However, on the day his sentence was to be announced, Brian unexpectedly attempted to withdraw the plea agreement and plead guilty instead. The court rejected his request, citing no valid justification for accepting it. During the final courtroom proceedings, Marty directly asked Brian why he had attacked her and nearly killed her, but he refused to provide a reason or make any closing statements. Marty is still recovering from the devastating attack, which left permanent scars on her face and neck. The injuries have distorted her facial features and affected her mobility. Despite these challenges, Marty remains determined and continues to train rigorously, believing she can regain her former self or even surpass it. In interviews, she often reflects on how someone only 26 years old could commit such a cruel act. Her resilience and self-belief have helped her heal from this violent incident, strengthening her resolve in the process. Marty returned to her routine fairly quickly and has become even more active. She took up kickboxing to learn self-defense, and sports have played a significant role in her recovery. She also created a website aimed at supporting others who have experienced traumatic events, using her personal story to inspire and encourage healing. In addition to these efforts, Marty continues to work as a designer for a clothing company, channeling her creativity into her art as a way to manage anxiety and stress. She credits her daughter, Mackenzie, as the cornerstone of her recovery and is deeply grateful for her unwavering support. Recently, Marty published a book that details the horrific incident that changed her life, with the hope of inspiring others to overcome adversity through resilience. She now actively works as a motivational speaker, meeting with various communities and offering the same support that helped her rebuild her life. As for Brian Pennington, her attacker, He remains in prison and is estranged from his family, including his mother, ex-wife, and children, who have all cut ties with him.